Chapter 4109. Wu Fu, or took some time before she managed to catch her breath. Her little face had turned pale from fright. Both her hands holding Hall Head Wu Yan's hands were still trembling. That frightened and pitiful look. It made Hall Head Wu Yan's eyes turned red from heartache. She pulled Wu Fu into her arms and gently patted her back to comfort her. Her eyes were filled with a murderous glint as she stared at Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo calmly welcomed this sharp gaze as the smile on her lips didn't diminish at all. She slowly walked towards them as her voice was gentle. "She's fine. After resting for a few days, she'll be able to jump around again." "Shut up!" Hall Head Wu Yan shouted angrily. Yiqing Luo spread her hands out as she put on an innocent look. "I'm just protecting myself." Following that, her lower lips curled upwards as her eyes rose, giving off an indescribable flirtatious look. Moreover speaking, Hall Head Wu Yan, as an elder, doesn't know how to teach the younger generation, so I shall help Hall Head Wu Yan to discipline this ignorant granddaughter of yours, in case she gets beaten to death outside. It was still all right if Yiqing Luo didn't say anything. This one sentence ignited the anger which Hall Head Wu Yan had been suppressing in her chest. She hugged Wu Fu tightly as her profound energy burst forth as it pressed towards Yiqing Luo in an overwhelming manner. "Who do you think you are? My granddaughter. Do you have the right to make irresponsible remarks?" The power under a raging fury. It was close to destroying the heavens and earth. It was just a moment's effort. Yiqing Luo felt that the air was surging with raging waves. She could even hear the sound of the air cracking continuously. The air waves kept on surging, one wave after another, spreading in all directions. The houses in all directions kept on shaking. The trees were rustling from a strong wind. There were even some trees which were uprooted and overturned. Yiqing Luo's face didn't show any signs of panic. Even in the face of the dark force that was rushing towards him, her expression didn't change at all. Her peripheral vision slightly glanced toward a certain direction. Immediately after, she concealed the flash of ridicule in her eyes. His footwork was quickly executed as the dark force pressed down on him. "TSK. I knew it. Hall Master Wu Yan is a person who doesn't keep his word. After releasing the hostage, Hall Master Wu Yan wants to kill me. Looks like I still need a hostage to ensure my safety in the Linglong Palace," the young girl said casually, her tone full of ridicule. As the saying goes, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. I'm afraid that mystic fairy of Wanyan City has learned her character of making trouble out of nothing from Hall Master Wanyan. "You." Hall Master Wu Yan's eyes turned icy cold as his murderous aura manifested, as he struck a palm strike towards Yiqing Luo. Courting death. Thick and tyrannical profound energy tumbled unceasingly, as though a raging tsunami was approaching from all directions. Yiqing Luo had nowhere to hide. However, this time round, Yiqing Luo had no intention to avoid it. His eyes were filled with laughter, as if he was mocking something. The surging dark force was extremely fast, but in a blink of an eye, it had already reached Yiqing Luo's face. The surrounding air seemed to be torn apart by the sharp, profound light. She instantly felt that it was hard to breathe as a stuffy feeling arose from the bottom of her heart. The surging tyrannical might continue to spread. Yiqing Luo's face turned slightly pale, but she didn't move a single step. Just as that raging tsunami was about to swallow Yiqing Luo, suddenly, Yiqing Luo's surroundings, at a speed which was visible to the naked eye, was enveloped by a layer of green halo. That halo enveloped Yiqing Luo within it. It was like a cyan crystal ball, and from time to time, it would flash with cyan electric light. Bam! Chapter 4110. Instantly, under that collision, two bursts of energy exploded, after a series of earthquakes. Only then did he gradually stop breathing. Hall Head Wu Yan's expression changed when she saw the layer of green light which enveloped Yiqing Luo. She swiftly raised her head and looked in front. When she saw the indistinct figure in the profound wave, her expression turned steely green for a moment. But it was just a fleeting moment. Immediately after, Her expression converged as she pursed her lips. Hall Master. From afar, a few figures walked over. All of them were dressed in lotus green robes, but the clothes and patterns on them were totally different. Walking right in front, her footwork was steady and dignified. Her dignified hair and makeup made her youthful face look a little old. Yiqing Luo estimated that this Ling Long Palace Hall Master was not more than 30 years old. Under the dusky, profound wave, that person's figure was indistinctly visible. It looked like it was very far away, but in a blink of an eye, she had already appeared in front of everyone. That person didn't look a Hall Head Wu Yan. Her gaze fell on Yiqing Luo immediately. Ling Long Palace Hall Master. Yiqing Luo greeted the Hall Master's gaze with a smile. Ling Long Palace Hall Master's gaze sunk as she stared at Yiqing Luo for a long time before nodding slightly. Misty. Hall Master. Hall Head Wu Yan's face turned black after being neglected. She's the murderer who killed 2 mysterious maidens. Now that she's at Ling Long Palace, she's still acting wantonly, attempting to kill our 3rd mysterious maiden. The hand which she used to point at Yiqing Luo was trembling slightly. Apparently, she was extremely infuriated. Hall Master. A person like this must be taught a lesson. Hall Head Wu Yan's hysterical accusations made Ling Long Palace Hall Master's gaze shift on her. When Hall Head Wu Yan saw that, she angrily complained, Hall Master, look at mysterious Yan maiden she almost. Hall Head Wu Yan. Ling Long Palace Hall Master calmly spoke. That voice was obviously dignified and solemn, but it was melodious and extremely pleasant to the ears. Hall Chief Wu Yan felt a chill down his spine and lowered his head slightly. I have my own plans for this matter. Her voice was very calm. However, his next words were cold and dignified. However, Hall Master Wu Yan, the most basic principle of a person is integrity. As the Hall Master of the Ling Long Hall, I hope that you will not do anything that will bring shame to the Ling Long Hall. Hall Master Wu Yan's face immediately turned green and red. His slightly lowered eyelids hid the cold glint that flashed across his eyes. His lips moved. You are right, Temple Master. Hall Master. It was obviously her. She attacked me in the Ling Long Palace and even tried to kill me. Grandma just felt sorry for me. When Wu Fu heard the Hall Master's words, she lifted her head from her grandmother's embrace. His face was pale and covered in cold sweat. He looked extremely haggard. Fua. Hall Head Wu Yan clasped Wu Fu's shoulder as he berated her in a low voice. He immediately raised his head, and his face was filled with terror. Fu is not sensible. Hall Master, please don't be calculative. Ling Long Palace Hall Master didn't even bother to take a look at Wu Fu. Her eyes were calm and indifferent. Misty said something very right. As mysterious maiden Wu Yan's elder, you can dote on her, but you must also discipline her. Hall Head Wu Yan felt a fire burning on her face. Chapter 4111. Wu Fu saw that her grandmother was acting so submissive. His face was filled with indignation. He opened his mouth, wanting to refute. Hall Master Wu Yan quickly pulled him back. The Ling Long Palace Lord only glanced at Wu Fu indifferently before looking away. When the Ling Long Palace Master's gaze landed on Yi Qingyu's expression changed. Hall Leader Wu Yan's body suddenly stiffened, and he lowered his head with a pale face. Hall Leader, I will definitely discipline mysterious Yan maiden strictly. She will definitely bring shame to Ling Long Palace. While the two were talking, Yiqing Luo, who was standing by the side, took a panoramic view of this scene. Just now, when Hall Master Wu Yan apologized, Old Man Song told her that there were other auras nearby. Yiqing Luo didn't need to guess to know that it was absolutely the Ling Long Palace Lord who had arrived. Because of that was why she had purposely let Wu Fu go. He also forced Hall Master Wu Yan to attack out of humiliation. The reason she did not dodge when Hall Master Wu Yan's ferocious attack was because she knew that the Hall Master of the Ling Long Hall would not watch as she was killed. After all, she still had the title of His Majesty's woman. If he really died in the Ling Long Palace Hall under such circumstances, he would not be able to escape. That would be like slapping Di Zun in the face. Therefore, The palace master of the Linglong Palace would definitely not stand idly by. It would also make it more believable that Hall Master Wu Yan had tried to kill her. This was blatant proof. Furthermore, who knew how long the Linglong Palace Master had been watching from the dark? How much did he see? No matter what, it was a fact that Wu Fu'er had taken the initiative to cause trouble and had even made the first move. The ones who were in the wrong were the two of them. "Miss Yi, are you all right?" The great judicial judge walked out from behind the Linglong Palace Lord and sized Yi Qing Luo up. This could not be considered concern. It was just a question to prevent other troubles from getting him into trouble. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled as she replied in an indifferent tone, "If Hall Master had come a little later, I might be in trouble. This matter is the fault of the Linglong Palace. The Linglong Palace will take responsibility for this." The Grand Judge cupped his hands towards Yi Qing Luo. "Linglong Palace will definitely give Miss Yi a satisfactory explanation." Yi Qing Luo raised her eyebrows. His attitude seemed to be completely different from when he first arrived at the Linglong Hall. He actually gave her a satisfactory explanation. "TSK, this change is a bit too big." Yi Qing Luo expressed that there was definitely a problem. It was because, had the Grand Judicial Officer verified what she had said to him in the carriage? This thought flashed past Yi Qing Luo's mind. Soon he got his answer, because when the Great Justice politely said those words, it was obvious that he was trying to curry favor with Kirin. Wu Fu'er, who had just recovered, was so angry that she almost exploded. Her face was pale as her eyes stared deadly at Yi Qing Luo as she cried out hysterically, "Grand Judicial Elder! She was the one who hurt me and even tried to kill me. How is it my fault?" Seeing that his granddaughter still dared to talk back to the Great Justice in front of the Hall Master Wu Yan immediately reached out to stop Wu Fu'er. The Grand Judge's gaze swept over her hand, which was holding Wu Fu'er's hand. He narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "Hall Leader Wu Yan, there is no need to stop me. I would like to hear what grievances the mysterious Lady of Yama has." Hall Leader Wu Yan's hand trembled as he wanted to explain for Wu Fu'er. A cold and dignified voice completely suppressed Hall Leader Wu Yan's words. "I would like to hear it too," the Linglong Palace Master said. Chapter 41:12. However, Wu Fu'er did not feel her grandmother's anxiety. Instead, she felt that the words of the Hall Master and the Judicial Grand Elder were supporting her. She raised her head with confidence and said, "Hall Master, Grand Elder of the Judicial Grand Elder, when we three Empyrean fairies left the Linglong Hall and returned to the main city, this woman killed without embroiling cities, Qiao Yulu, and shadowless cities, Mu Qiulan." She paused and said, "After the Grand Elder of the Judicial Grand Elder brought this woman back, she wanted to kill me, the third Empyrean fairy. If not for my grandmother's timely arrival, I would have been a corpse in her hands." Wu Fu'er's eyes reddened as she said this. She pinched her sleeves and pressed the corners of her eyes, looking aggrieved. "She actually dared to attack me in the territory of the Linglong Palace. She clearly doesn't respect the Linglong Palace and you, Palace Master." She did not forget to direct the anger towards the Linglong Hall Master as she complained. After a while, Wu Fu'er raised her eyes tentatively, sobbing as she quietly looked at the expression of the Linglong Palace Lord. But she looked at him. She felt a chill run down her spine. The hand that was pressing the corners of her eyes froze. The reason for that was because the Linglong Palace's Hall Master did not reveal the furious expression that she had imagined. More accurately, the Linglong Hall Master did not even show any expression. Her eyes looked as if they had been soaked in ice, without any ripples. Lord! Wu Fu'er was so shocked that she took a step back, her voice trembling. The Judicial Grand Elder of the Judicial Grand Elder sneered at her and said word by word, "Where did Yin Xin and Vi hear the rumor that Miss Yi killed the Empyrean fairy?" Wu Fu'er's face turned pale in an instant. She wriggled her lips and trembled a little. The Hall Master and I have been nearby for a long time," the Judicial Grand Elder of the Judicial Grand Elder added. "Yes, from a moment you brought people to break into the guest room." Wu Fu'er's eyes widened. Even Hall Master Wu Yan's expression changed. Plop! The grandfather and grandson pair knelt in front of the Ling Long Palace Lord, and they were trembling in fear. The judicial grand elder of the judicial grand elder and the Hall Master saw everything clearly. They had no way to refute. The two of them kept begging for mercy. The judicial grand elder's words shocked Yi Qing Luo slightly. Her long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly. Before Wu Fu barged in, she was already nearby. How long ago was that? Does that mean he also knows that the palace master of the Palace of Darkness is in her room? She actually did not notice it at all. Perhaps, just now, Old Man Tsang suddenly sensed an unfamiliar aura nearby. The palace master of the Linglong Palace had intentionally wanted her to sense it, if that was the case. This Linglong Palace master was really a bit scary. Hall Chief Wu Yin, you should know what to do. Linglong Palace Hall Master's faint voice rang, interrupting Yi Qing Luo's deep thoughts. Hall Master Wu Yin shrunk back a little. His hands that were kneeling on the ground slightly curled up, and he finally said word by word, "Yes, I understand." Hall Wu Yin walked past Wu Yin and Wu Fu without making a sound. But Hall Leader Wu Yin felt a huge pressure pressing down on her internal organs, causing her face to instantly turn pale as she felt a dull pain. But she didn't dare to make a sound. Chapter 41:13. Hall Master Wu Yin knelt down with his forehead on the ground, not daring to make a sound. "Miss Yi." Linglong Palace Lord stopped in front of Yi Qing Luo. The distance between the two was just a step away. The overbearing pressure made Yi Qing Luo's brows creased slightly. She pursed her lips and met Linglong Palace Lord's gaze without any intention to retreat. "What's the matter, Linglong Palace Lord?" Although this matter started because of mysterious Lady Yin, but Miss Yi's actions, I don't approve. Linglong Palace Lord said calmly. Yi Qing Luo nodded calmly. I don't deny this point. Following that, she smiled faintly and her brows were calm. After all, I'm a guest invited by the great judicial magistrate. As a guest, it's indeed inappropriate to make a move in a master's house. Saying that, she cupped her hands together and bowed respectfully towards Linglong Palace Lord. Will Linglong Palace Lord please forgive me? Faced with the oppressive might of the Linglong Palace's Hall Master and the invisible pressure pressing down on him, Linglong's expression changed. Yi Qing Luo didn't have any stage fright. Instead, she faced it calmly. This made Linglong Palace Lord's eyes filled with some probing. Especially Yi Qing Luo's calm look and actions without any ill feelings really made one had no choice but to look up to her. At such a young age, she knew when to yield and when to stand tall. She knew how to use extreme measures to protect herself in times of danger. He also knew how to admit his mistakes and apologize in a well-behaved manner. She couldn't pick out any mistakes at all. This made it hard for her to continue pursuing this matter. The eyes of the Linglong Palace Master deepened and the corners of his mouth curled up into a very shallow smile. Miss Ye's magnanimity makes this Palace Master admire you. This Palace Master will accept your apology. Thank you, Linglong Palace Lord. Yi Qing Luo smiled as her eyes curved. This scene made Wu Fu who was kneeling on the ground, eyes blazing. She almost couldn't control herself and wanted to stand up to disrupt this peaceful scene. She was Linglong Palace's mysterious lady. She was the real victim. She was almost killed by Yi Qing Luo. As the Linglong Palace Lord, not only did she not help her seek revenge, he even punished her and was so kind to the enemies of the Linglong Palace. When had the Palace Lord of the Linglong Palace given them the slightest bit of face? Never. What was this? The more Wu Fu thought about it, the more indignant she felt. Before she could do anything, Hall Master Wu Yin, who knew her well, pressed her down. Hall Master Wu Yin glared at his granddaughter as a warning. At this critical juncture, if Wu Fu continued to cause trouble, she was afraid that she would not be able to protect Wu Fu, even though he was holding Wu Fu down. Hall Chief Wu Yan's anger was no less than Wu Fu's. She did her best for the Linglong Palace and exhausted all her efforts for the development of the Linglong Palace. But in the end, he was inferior to an outsider. Moreover, it was a murderer who had killed the mysterious fairy that the Linglong Palace had painstakingly cultivated. Just now, the meaning of the Linglong Palace Master's words was already very clear. The Palace Master hoped that she would personally teach her granddaughter a lesson. Wu Fuer's position as the Empyrean Fairy was about to be shaken. Not only that, his position as the Hall Master of the main hall would also be shaken. The guest room that Yi Qing Luo was staying in was completely destroyed because of Wu Fuer. The Linglong Palace Master immediately changed a room for Yi Qing Luo. That room was adjacent to the judicial court. Basically, if there was any big commotion, the judicial court would be alerted at the first instance. The arrangement by the Linglong Palace Master was to prevent something like Wu Fuer from happening again. Chapter 41:14. Yi Qing Luo knew what was going on. In fact, they were spying on her. In any case, this Linglong Palace Hall was someone else's territory. No matter where he lived, he would be under the watchful eyes of others. She didn't have much to say about it. Moreover, after moving into this room, obviously, there were no more people looking for trouble. Previously, it was like the Calabash brothers saving their grandpa. Now it was too quiet. Ever since he helped Yi Qing Luo to change her room, the Linglong Palace Lord did not appear again. Instead, the Grand Judicial Judge would come and hang around from time to time. After holing up in the Linglong Palace for a day, Yi Qing Luo couldn't stay any longer. That day, after the Linglong Palace Master and the Grand Judicial Judge had sent her back to her new room, they had looked at her meaningfully for a long time with complicated gazes. He turned around and left. He did not mention anything about the death of the Empyrean Fairy. It seemed that on the way to the Linglong Palace, the Grand Judicial Magistrate had purposely gone to find out what she had said to him. He had also gained a clear understanding of what had happened during the auction. Many people could prove that Xiao Yulu's death had nothing to do with her. Moreover, it was her, Yi Qing Luo, and her group of brothers who had saved the various powerhouses in the Earth domain. This was why the judicial system's attitude towards Yi Qing Luo had such an obvious change. This was also the reason why Linglong Palace Lord didn't investigate the reason why Yi Qing Luo made a move on mysterious maiden in Linglong Palace. However, these are the reasons. Wu Fuer and Hall Leader Wu Yan would never be able to understand. However, even if she knew that she was not the one who killed Xiao Yulu, the Linglong Palace Lord and the Grand Judge still had no intention of talking to her. Yi Qing Luo. So why did he bring her to the Linglong Hall? His attitude was one of indifference. Wasn't he simply stalling for time? Within a day in the Linglong Palace, the only thing Yi Qing Luo could confirm was the Linglong Palace was indeed related to the Gloomy Palace. However, it was not deep. At the very least, the body of the Linglong Palace Master did not have the sinister aura of the Dark Nether Palace. In fact, there wasn't even the slightest hint of his aura when he came into contact with it. This made Yi Qing Luo curious. Yesterday, how did the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace sneak into her room without being noticed by anyone in the Linglong Palace? Yi Qing Luo couldn't understand and felt bored. Yesterday, it was one wave after another. She was annoyed. He was so bored that he didn't even have someone to talk to. She wanted to take the initiative to cause trouble. Yi Qing Luo sighed softly as she lowered her head and lifted her finger. Her gaze fell on her fingertip, on that ring which resembled a fire phoenix. She caressed it gently. The news had already been out for a day. Hadn't DMO Xin followed the scent of the profound phoenix ring and rushed over to the Linglong Palace? Just as he was thinking, a few light footsteps could be heard outside the door. One of them whispered, "Don't make any noise." The person inside was someone who even dared to make a move on the mysterious Lady of Yin. If we make too much noise, we'll be easily discovered. Shoo, don't talk. Another person snapped. There were about 3 or 4 of them. Yi Qing Luo raised her eyebrows. What situation was this? She was just thinking of stirring things up. Trouble came knocking on my door? But even if he were to do so, he would have to find someone with a higher degree of difficulty. These few were obviously inexperienced little disciples. Running here, other than sinning their heads, what else could they do? Chapter 41:15. Women make things difficult for other women because of these few points. A female disciple pretended to be experienced. What? It's either jealousy or jealousy or jealousy. The female disciple replied. TSK. No matter what, it's all jealousy. This jealousy thing is different. The female disciple was unfathomable. Everyone knows that our Ling Long Palace's mysterious maiden is a rare beauty under the heavens. Her looks are superb, and her status is something that everyone looks up to. Do you think that woman named Yi Qing Luo wouldn't be jealous? That's true. The other female disciples nodded in agreement. The female disciple snorted coldly. So, because of jealousy, her heart is already twisted. All of you lower your voices. Don't let her hear you. The person who berated them earlier reprimanded again. We're here on behalf of Yin Xiannu to see if she's secretly plotting to kill Yin Xiannu. If she finds out, all of us will be in trouble. The few female disciples sighed and didn't say another word. Yi Qing Luo leaned against the headboard, listening to what the female disciples said outside the door. After hearing that, she couldn't help but raised her brows. These female disciples were duped by Wu Fu heir to see what she was doing? What was he up to this time? She was just punished by the Ling Long Palace Lord yesterday. Now, she had the energy to stir up trouble again. When the few female disciples quietly pushed open Yi Qing Luo's room window, revealing a small gap, and were about to cast their vision into the room, the female disciples looked into a pair of charming eyes that were smiling faintly. Just a glance. They felt their hearts tightening, not from shock, but their souls were captivated by this gorgeous face in front of them. She even forgot to breathe. Because of this, that pair of long and narrow eyes were sparkling like the stars, dazzling and dazzling. That pink lips curled into a smile. Even though they were females, they felt their faces and ears turning red, as though they were being teased. You. Someone regained his senses, as he ignorantly pointed at Yi Qing Luo, as he swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Yi Qing Luo smiled sweetly as she waved her hand at them. I'm the one whom you mentioned. Jealous of your mysterious maiden of hell. Yi Qing Luo, what a coincidence. You are. The women's faces turned pale with fright when they heard this. One by one, they were so scared that they fell out of the window and sat on the ground. Yi Qing Luo leaned over and leaned against the window. He stuck his head out to look at the ground. There were 4 female disciples in total. Each of them looked to be about 13 or 14 years old. He was also very handsome. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled. Aren't you here to see me? Why are you so surprised to see me? The 4 female disciples stared at Yi Qing Luo without blinking. He was both shocked and astonished, especially when she said that Yi Qing Luo was jealous of Wu Fu heir's female disciple. Her face seemed to be on fire. His pair of eyes, almost as though he was dead set on Yi Qing Luo's face. The young lady in front of him had a gorgeous face, peerless elegance. Her fiery red robe set off that gorgeous face, which was very enchanting. Every smile and frown was a suffocating charm. It could be said, this young lady was the most beautiful lady they had ever seen since they were born. What do they say about jealousy, envy? Chapter 41:16. Wu Fu heir's looks were totally incomparable to Yi Qing Luo's. How could Yi Qing Luo possibly be jealous of Wu Fu heir or the other 2 mysterious maidens who were already dead? What a slap to the face. The female disciples' breathing became erratic. Their faces turned red. He crawled up from the ground in a panic. The few female disciples patted off the dust on their bodies, as they were embarrassed and irritated, not daring to take a look at Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo leaned against the window and tilted her head as her smile deepened. These female disciples were really innocent and adorable. He didn't expect that there would be such a naive young lady in the Ling Long Palace. These were probably children who had yet to undergo training and had just entered the Ling Long Palace. These women were merely being used by Wu Fu. Yi Qing Luo had no intention to haggle with them. Just as he was about to say something to tease them, he told them to leave. but the words were on the tip of his tongue. Before he could say a word, these few female disciples suddenly had a change in expression as all of them held onto their own chests. Their eyes widened as they stared deadly at Yiqing Luo. All four of them had the same expression on their faces, and all of them were in pain. Yiqing Luo immediately swallowed back the words that were in her mouth. What happened? She flipped over and jumped out from the window. She quickly moved to the front of the female disciples and checked their pulse. The four female disciples widened their eyes in agony as they shook their heads desperately at her. But he couldn't say a word. In just a moment, their faces were covered with a layer of greenish black. Poison. You guys are poisoned. The moment she felt their pulse, Yiqing Luo could tell that something was amiss. The female disciples were like fish on the shore, one hand pressing on their chest, the other desperately waving, as if they were grasping at a life-saving straw. The fear of death filled their eyes. Without waiting for Yiqing Luo to take out the antidote from the profound phoenix ring, the faces of the four female disciples were already covered with a layer of black. Then he stopped breathing and fell to the ground. At the same time, an urgent and sharp voice rang out. Judicial elders, this subordinate is absolutely not talking nonsense. I saw all of this with my own eyes, and if I don't rush over in time, I'm afraid. Following that, a middle-aged woman led three women dressed in elder robes over. When he saw Yiqing Luo half squatting on the ground and four female disciples lying on the ground, that middle-aged woman practically sprinted over as she stretched out her hand to tug Yiqing Luo. You're great. Witness and material evidence are all here. Let's see how you're going to quibble. Only, her hand had yet to touch Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo dodged sideways. She took a few steps back from the middle-aged woman, and a cold glint flashed across her eyes. If she still couldn't figure out that this was a trap, she would be an idiot. It was obvious that this was a trap set up by Wu Fu Heir, or more accurately, Hall Leader Wu Yan. He had purposely used these four female disciples to deal with her. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence? Coincidentally, these four female disciples died in front of her. Someone rushed over with the judicial elders, and they happened to see it clearly. In order to deal with her, that pair of grandfather and grandson had really put in a lot of effort. He could even sacrifice his own disciple. These four female disciples who had just entered Linglong Palace were just a few small cannon fodder. What's going on? Chapter 41:17. The Grand Judge had just left Yiqing Luo's room 2 hours ago. At that time, Yiqing Luo didn't show any signs of abnormality. What else could it be? I've long heard from Home Master Wu Yan that this Miss Yi is arrogant, but I had not expected her to be so arrogant. A lady behind the Grand Judge sneered. Yesterday, she injured Yin Xian Envy, and today, she killed 4 new disciples of Linglong Palace. Second Judge, aren't your words a little too arbitrary? The Grand Judge frowned as she took a look at the lady who choked. What exactly happened, we will only know after we investigate. Grand Judge, Missy was brought back to Linglong Palace by you, and the person who made Linglong Palace into such a foul atmosphere is also you. Her lips twitched coldly as her eyes were filled with ridicule. Now, you still want to argue for her? Grand Judge, are you muddle-headed? The Grand Judge's face sunk a few degrees. Even Yiqing Luo, who was a bystander, could tell that the undercurrent between the two courts was surging. At this moment, the third lady immediately stood up and eased the atmosphere. Grand Judge, Second Judge, although we saw 4 female disciples died in front of Miss Yi, but after all, we have not seen it with our own eyes. How did Miss Yi kill the 4 female disciples? It's still too early to say anything now. She pulled the Grand Judge and the Second Judge. Let's wait for Hall Master to return and report this matter to him before we make a decision. Although this lady said that she was trying to be a peacemaker. However, from her tone and words, one could tell that she had a different opinion. She was certain that they were killed by Yiqing Luo. Right now, they were just lacking the most crucial evidence. The Grand Judge shook off that person's hand. Third Judge, don't think that I don't know what you and Second Judge are trying to do. What can we do? The third judicial judge pushed the first judicial judge's arm and smiled warmly. for female disciples have indeed died here, and Miss Yi was indeed beside them. In addition, Protector Fan saw it with his own eyes. All of this can't be faked. It's understandable that the second judicial judge would suspect Miss Yi. The grand judge's face darkened as his gaze shot towards Yi Qing Luo. What do you have to explain? What else is there to explain? Protector Fan saw with his own eyes that she bullied the new disciple of the Ling Long Palace Hall and specially went to the judicial court to invite us over. What's there to explain? The second judicial court's eyes were cold and fierce as he shouted angrily. Immediately following that, he shot his vision towards that middle-aged woman who went to capture Yi Qing Luo earlier. The middle-aged woman, Protector Fan, immediately nodded and replied, "Yes, that's right. When I saw Miss Yi bullying the new disciple, I hurriedly rushed to the judicial court. In less than half an instant's time, Miss Yi killed him." The second elder sneered. "This elder will definitely seek justice for the disciples in the hall." She raised her hand and said sternly, "Men, take the female disciple's body away and examine it carefully. Find out the cause of death." Soon, other female disciples walked over in an orderly manner. Who dares move? The first judicial officer was obviously infuriated by the second judicial officer's attitude. His face darkened as he said, "No one is allowed to touch these 4 corpses before the hall master returns. The female disciples have just died. Do you want them to be unable to rest in peace even after they die?" Second preceptor asked. Chapter 41:18. Tamper? What kind of people do you think we are? The second judicial elder's face sank as he bent down to grab those dead female disciples. Seeing the second judicial elder making a move, the first judicial elder naturally would not stand idly by. Their arms collided. Immediately, the profound energy surged wildly in all directions. Gusts of hurricanes were emitted from their intertwined hands. Very quickly, the two of them were in a mess. The other disciples immediately dodged. The third judicial elder stood on the spot with a smile, staring at the two of them, without any intention to stop them. It was obvious that they had long been used to such a situation. It seemed that the first judicial elder and second judicial elder were notorious for not getting along. It was common for them to fight. Yi Qing Luo's line of sight slowly shifted from the two of them to the 3 judicial officers. Her charming eyes narrowed slightly. Her pink lips were slightly pursed. A trace of light flashed past her eyes. She didn't know why, but compared to those two, Yi Qing Luo had a strange feeling towards this third elder who seemed to be trying to smooth things over. Perhaps Yi Qing Luo's gaze was too obvious. The third judicial elder, who had been smiling at the two of them, suddenly turned his head and followed Yi Qing Luo's gaze. Their line of sight collided. Yi Qing Luo also didn't feel embarrassed after being discovered by others. Instead, she calmly raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "Third judicial elder doesn't intend to stop them?" The third judicial elder was all smiles. At this age, coupled with the amiability between his brows, he looked like an amiable grandmother. But the more such emotions, the moon made the strange feeling in Yi Qing Luo's heart intensified. The third judicial elder shook his head. The two of them have been fighting for a lifetime. They are used to it. When they are tired, they will naturally stop. Yi Qing Luo hooked her lips and didn't respond. It was the third judicial elder who opened up the topic, walked towards Yi Qing Luo, and asked with a smile, "The first judicial elder treats you really well. Yesterday for you, they did not hesitate to invite the hall master to change your room. And today for you, they fought with the second judicial elder." She sounded like she was just having a casual chat, but the meaning of probing in her words was still very obvious. It seemed that the third judicial elder felt that she and the first judicial elder might have reached an unspeakable deal. This was also a test. What was the relationship between her and the judge? Yi Qing Luo pretended not to understand the deeper meaning in her words, tilted her head, and her slender fingers curled up a strand of hair hanging on her shoulder. Third judicial magistrate's words are wrong. What do you mean? After all, I was personally brought back by the Grand Inquisitor. I can barely be considered a guest. But the mysterious Lady of Yin came to find trouble with me without any explanation and even tried to kill me. Hall Master Wu Yin, for the sake of his own granddaughter, the two of them tried to take my life. Isn't this a slap in the face to the great justice system? Yi Qing Luo propped her chin as she replied with a beaming smile. As for now, you've said it yourself, the both of them have been fighting for their entire lives, and now they're merely making use of this matter to make a fuss. Yi Qing Luo's words made the three judges speechless. Yi Qing Luo took another look at the two who were entangled in battle and said, "Do you believe that if the second judicial judge were to stand on my side today, the person who insisted that I killed the 4 female disciples would be the first judicial judge?" Chapter 41:19. Yi Qing Luo smiled as she lowered her eyes to look at the 4 heavily poisoned female disciples whose faces were pitch black. What a pity that these innocent and naive children have become the first batch of sacrifices. Children? Hearing Yi Qing Luo's words, the 3 judges felt a little strange. Isn't Missy only 15 or 16 years old? Bam, rumble, just as the both of them were talking. The surroundings suddenly exploded with a deafening sound. The two's energy collided heavily. Between heaven and earth, sand and pebbles flew as the profound waves surged. The air seemed to have split open into numerous cracks, wave after wave, reverberating in all directions. Yi Qing Luo and the 3 judges leapt up at the same time, swiftly avoiding the affected areas. The violent energy was like a tide, cracking the ground. The house shook as sand and pebbles flew up. After the two of them collided, they quickly rushed together again. Bam! There was another explosion. But it wasn't just the both of them who collided, but a breathtaking and violent energy suddenly rushed into the profound wave which the both of them were entangled in. That valiant and overbearing energy. Almost in an instant, it broke through the surging energy between the both of them. It also easily blocked the two's burning battle intent. Yi Qing Luo, who was hiding in the safe zone, raised her head up, looking towards the direction of the third energy attack. He saw that graceful and noble woman slowly walk out from the air ripples that filled the sky. She was standing in the middle of the great judicial and second judicial. A pair of calm and emotionless eyes stared at the two of them quietly. Even if she didn't speak, they could clearly feel that kind of awe-inspiring, imposing manner from her. The two of them who were entangled in battle were interrupted by someone, but they didn't dare to reveal any anger on their faces. Instead, they swiftly stood up straight and respectfully bowed towards the lady who suddenly appeared. "Palace Lord, have you two had enough?" Linglong Palace Lord spoke indifferently, with a trace of coldness in her tone. The both of them trembled as they suddenly knelt on the ground. "Palace Lord, please forgive us." The Linglong Palace Master's pitch-black eyes were as calm as still water. "As a judicial elder, have you forgotten the rules of the Linglong Palace? We wouldn't dare." Both of them pressed their foreheads to the ground. "Don't dare?" The Linglong Palace Lord looked at them coldly and said, "This Palace Lord really can't see why you don't dare to do it." The two of them shivered and didn't dare to speak again. Lord Hall Master, Guard Fan, who had been hiding in the corner, suddenly rushed out. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the Linglong Palace Master. "Palace Master, the matter is not what you see." When Protector Fan rushed out, Yi Qing Luo's slender brows rose. This Protector Fan had led 3 members of the judiciary to appear when the 4 female disciples had just breathed their last. Then he claimed that he had seen her humiliating the 4 female disciples with his own eyes. Clearly, this Guard Fan was on Hall Master Wu Yan's side. But just now, if she wasn't mistaken, the reason why Protector Fan had rushed out at this time was because of the Emperor. It seemed like the 3 judges secretly gave her a look. This third judge, indeed, wasn't as amiable as she looked on the surface. "Speak." The icy cold words were filled with majesty. The Linglong Palace Lord's chilly eyes looked towards Guard Fan. Just one look. Guard Fan was so scared that she started trembling. Chapter 41:20. With a face full of tears and snot, Guard Fan recounted what had happened just now. She emphasized that it was Yi Qing Luo who had bullied the female disciples and poison them when she brought the 3 judicial elders over. She also emphasized that the first judicial elder couldn't differentiate right from wrong and had to defend Yiqing Luo and stop the second judicial elder from touching the female disciples' corpses, which led to the war. In the end, this battle was the reason for the first judicial elder. The second judicial elder was just defending herself. After these words were said, the first judicial elder's face turned as black as charcoal. But she didn't refute immediately as she continued to kneel on the ground respectfully. Her hands, which were placed on the ground, were clenched into fists tightly. Linglong Palace Lord's expression didn't change much when she heard what she said, only that her gaze fell onto Yiqing Luo for a moment. Very quickly, it shifted away. Protector Fan didn't get any response from the Palace Lord and shrunk her head guiltily and fearfully. I'm telling the truth. Did I say that I don't believe you? Linglong Palace Lord sneered. Protector Fan shivered. Linglong Palace Lord walked past the 3 people kneeling on the ground and walked directly towards the 4 female disciples' corpses. Because of the battle between the 2 judicial elders, the 4 female disciples were covered with a layer of gravel and dust. Their pitch-black faces, which were obviously heavily poisoned, were particularly eye-catching. Linglong Palace Lord's gaze swept past those few people. She looked at Yiqing Luo. What do you want me to explain? Yiqing Luo shrugged. You Linglong Palace ganged up to bully an outsider like me. Is there any use for me to explain? Say it, I will make the decision. Linglong Palace Lord replied. The minute she said this, Protector Fan became anxious. Palace Lord, I'm telling the truth, absolutely not a single word of lies. You must not listen to that woman's nonsense. Linglong Palace Lord glanced at her, although she didn't say a word, but her eyes flashed past a faintly discernible ridicule. Yiqing Luo laughed. Protector Fan, I didn't say anything. How did it become a bunch of nonsense? I feel that Protector Fan has a guilty conscience. Protector Fan instantly raised her head. You're sinister and cunning. He would definitely quibble. Even the first judicial department has been bewitched by you and is fighting against the second judicial department. I just don't want Lord Hallmaster to be deceived by you. Oh, is that so? Yiqing Luo looked at Guardian Fan smilingly. So, in Guardian Fan's eyes, the Grand Judicial Court and Linglong Palace Lord are so easily bewitched. Guard Fan was so scared that his face turned pale. He kowtowed to the Linglong Palace Master. This subordinate absolutely did not mean that. Enough. Linglong Palace Lord's expression sunk slightly as she shouted to stop Guardian Fan and looked towards Yiqing Luo. If there's nothing else to explain, this Palace Lord will take it as your tacit agreement. Yiqing Luo laughed as her eyes were filled with ridicule. As for me, there's really nothing much to explain. After all, just a little check on this corpse, and the truth will eventually be revealed. Linglong Palace Lord squinted at Yiqing Luo as she raised her voice. Men, bring the corpse down. No need. Yiqing Luo raised her hand, stopping Linglong Palace Lord's words. Immediately following that, she leapt up and landed lightly beside Linglong Palace Lord. Following that, she bent down and lifted up a corpse on the ground. Chapter 41:21. Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes with a "you're an idiot" expression as she looked at Guardian Fan. I destroyed the corpse in front of all of you? Are you an idiot? Guardian Fan's face turned pale and red from being choked, as though he was infuriated but didn't dare to flare up. Yiqing Luo didn't bother about anyone else. He lifted up the female disciple's corpse and dragged her face, revealing that black face before the eyes of the Linglong Palace's palace master. Linglong Palace Lord, do you think that this poison looks like it was just administered? Yiqing Luo asked with a smile. The female disciples' faces were all purplish-black from being poisoned. It was extremely terrifying. Linglong Palace Lord took a look at the female disciple's corpse. Doesn't look like it. Yiqing Luo placed that female disciple back onto the ground and took out a handkerchief to wipe her hands while saying, according to what Guardian Fan said, half an incense ago, she had seen me humiliating these female disciples and half an incense later, the female disciples were poisoned. Then may I ask, how did I manage to let these female disciples' poison penetrate deep into their bone marrow in just half an incense's time? When Yiqing Luo asked this question, her pair of long and narrow eyes curved into crescents. But the words that came out of her mouth were sonorous and powerful, like a huge rock, falling heavily on Guardian Fan's heart. Guardian Fan was so frightened that he shivered all over. His eyelashes trembled, not daring to look at Yiqing Luo. His heart was beating restlessly. This young lady obviously looked like she was only 15 or 16 years old. But she had such a strong, imposing manner. Just one gaze, and she pressured him till he couldn't breathe properly. Seeing that Guardian Fan had already lost her head out of fear and was about to give herself away. Yiqing Luo's brows curved even more, as her voice was suppressed to an extremely low level, so deep that it made one's heart tighten. Regarding this, I have another question. Why? You obviously saw me humiliating your Linglong Palace Lord's female disciples. But as a guardian, why did you stand by and watch? Obviously, you could have stood out to stop it. Why did you take the unnecessary action of running over to the judicial courtyard and calling 3 judicial elders over? Yiqing Luo paused for a moment. Her slender fingers caressed her pink lips as she smiled sweetly. Regarding this point, I hope Protector Fan can give a reasonable explanation. Nurse Fan's mind went blank under the pressure of the questions. Actually, these questions were easy to answer. But when Yiqing Luo's pair of smiling yet treacherous cold eyes looked over, his mind was filled with thoughts, but he couldn't spit out a single word. This kind of pressure, Dean Fan had only felt this from the Linglong Palace Master. Cough. Third judicial officer who had been observing from the side coughed lightly as he slowly walked towards the direction of Yiqing Luo and the Linglong Palace Lord. Guardian Fan has been in the Linglong Palace for 10 over years, and her loyalty towards the Linglong Palace. I believe that Guardian Fan will not make things difficult for you for no reason. The meaning behind his words was she believed Protector Fan's words. She also felt that Yiqing Luo had indeed humiliated the new female disciple. Following that, third judicial officer became gentle, as though he was a peacemaker, as he cupped his fists towards the Linglong Palace Lord. Mr. Palace Lord, if both parties insist on their own version of events, then this matter should be investigated properly. We cannot let outsiders see our Linglong Palace as a joke. Her words, although gentle, but the meaning expressed in her words was extremely obvious. Yiqing Luo was only one person. We have to believe in our own family. If it was because of an outsider like Yiqing Luo, they would instead suspect their own family. Chapter 41:22. Yiqing Luo understood the deeper meaning in her words as her lips curled upwards as she smiled at her. Third judicial magistrate returned the same warm smile. That kind look seemed as though she was really thinking for her sake. The third judicial judge's words soothed Protector Fan's restless heart. She tried her best to calm herself down. Hall Master, I am absolutely loyal to Linglong Palace and to you. I will not dare to say anything false. She raised her head with a look of facing death calmly. Regarding what Missy said, I can't explain. As she said that, she looked at Yiqing Luo furiously, not concealing her disgust towards her at all. Yesterday, Missy almost killed mysterious Yen Nv and forced Hall Master Wu Yin to kneel down and apologize. This matter had already spread throughout the entire Linglong Palace. When I saw Missy bullying the new female disciples, even mysterious Yen Nv was not Missy's opponent. If I were to step forward to stop her, I'm afraid one of the 4 corpses would become my position. The judicial court is just next door. I only needed to rush over to the judicial court and invite the 3 judicial elders to uphold justice. But who knew? Guardian Fan kowtowed hard as she spoke in extreme agony. If I knew that she would be so vicious, even if I had to die, I would stop her. These words were spoken with great sincerity. When Yiqing Luo heard it, she felt that she was really deranged, the main culprit who poisoned the new female disciples. Third judicial magistrate coincidentally opened her mouth again. Hall Master, As for what happened later, the other two judicial elders, and I can also prove, when we followed Guardian Fan over, we indeed saw these 4 new female disciples lying at Miss Ye's feet. She sighed again as she shook her head helplessly. In this kind of situation, anyone would misunderstand. It was inevitable that Guardian Fan would lose control of her emotions. After all, in Guardian Fan's heart, all the new disciples in Linglong Palace are her children. Guardian Fan even cooperated as she hugged her own head and kowtowed hard onto the ground. Between the two of them, it left Yi Qing Luo with no way out. The second judicial judge tidied up his messy robe and proudly raised his eyebrows at the first judicial judge. The third judicial judge is right. When we rushed over, we indeed saw the female disciples falling at Miss Ye's feet. First judicial judge, am I right? The grand judge's face twitched. He gritted his teeth and said, yes. Seeing the first judicial magistrate giving in, the second judicial magistrate felt even more satisfied. There's no need for any investigation on this matter. Yi Qing Luo's intention to kill our Linglong Palace's people isn't just a matter of 1 or 2 days. She patted her sleeve again and looked sideways at the grand judge. Mysterious Maiden Wang's death can be proven to have nothing to do with Yi Qing Luo, but mysterious Maiden Ing was indeed killed by Yi Qing Luo. This point is an undeniable fact. Miss Yi, if you really want to prove your innocence, you'd better cooperate with Linglong Palace's investigation. Third judicial judge persuaded Yi Qing Luo in a friendly tone. Hearing the 3 of them talking one after another, Yi Qing Luo kept a faint smile on her face as her arms crossed over her chest, without much change in her emotions. That was until the third judicial division brought the topic back to her. She lifted her eyelids lazily. She raised her hand and placed her slender, jade-like fingers by her lips. Following that, she gave a lazy yawn. Chapter 41-23. Miss Yi, second judicial officer's face sunk as he shouted, "Don't think that you can strut around Linglong Palace Hall just because of the Overlord's power. A life for a life is a matter of course. Even if the Overlord comes personally, you have to give us an explanation for this." Yi Qing Luo's indifference, as though she didn't put anything in her eyes, really infuriated the few of them. Her tone also became heavier. Yi Qing Luo tilted her head as she smiled faintly. Her slender hands slowly fell to the side of her body. The expression on her face was still that indifferent, without any ripples of emotions. Before she could open her mouth, a voice that was as cold as ice spoke. It was light and slow, yet it carried an irresistible pressure that easily suppressed the atmosphere in the area. "Have you said enough?" Just 4 simple words. Even the arrogant second judicial officer unconsciously lowered his head. When this voice rang, it made Yi Qing Luo raise her brows in astonishment as she looked at the lady beside her. Since the 3 of them started talking one after another, not giving anyone a chance to reply, Linglong Palace Lord had not spoken a word. At this moment, the moment she opened her mouth, it made one's heart tremble. The Linglong Palace Master's face was calm and indifferent. On her beautiful face, there was an oppressive feeling that made one unable to breathe. Her eyes were as deep as an abyss, so black that it was gloomy. The atmosphere instantly became extremely oppressive. Silence for a moment. Linglong Palace Lord spoke again. "Don't you like to talk? Why, not continuing." The few of them shrunk back. Even second judicial officer followed suit and knelt on the ground. And men, to be more precise, other than Yi Qing Luo, everyone else knelt on the ground. This kneel. Yi Qing Luo was like a crane in a flock of chickens. Second judicial officer quietly raised his head as he glanced sideways at Yi Qing Luo, as though he was mocking her for her lack of manners. However, the palace master of the Linglong Palace was obviously angry. She didn't blame Yi Qing Luo at this moment. Anyway, thinking of Yi Qing Luo, this kind of young lady who didn't know etiquette, in the end, she was the one who suffered. But unexpectedly, things didn't turn out like what second judicial officer thought. Towards Yi Qing Luo's standing out, the Linglong Palace Master did not have any reaction at all. Her cold gaze was fixed on the few people kneeling on the ground. Since you don't think you're wrong, why are you kneeling on the ground? The expressions of the few of them froze as they could not discern the emotions in the Ling Long Palace Lord's tone. No one dared to speak first. The second and third judicial officers exchanged glances and clenched their fists. Palace Master, do you think that the deaths of these new female disciples have nothing to do with Miss Yi? We will come to a conclusion after the inspection. A cold light flashed across the face of the Ling Long Palace Master. Following that, she looked at Yi Qing Luo as her gaze was indifferent. What does Miss Yi think? We're in your territory, so naturally we'll listen to you. Yi Qing Luo spread out her hands as she replied indifferently. The Ling Long Hall Master swept her gaze across the crowd. Soon, a few of the female disciples kneeling on the ground stood up and carried the corpses away. The female disciples were carrying it. The Ling Long Palace Lord said indifferently, Miss Yi doesn't look like someone who would lower herself. If you don't want to, I can't make things difficult for you. The meaning behind her words was not to act as though she was forced. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose. This Ling Long Palace Lord's attitude. Chapter 41-24. She really couldn't tell what the Ling Long Palace Lord was thinking about. The Ling Long Palace Lord seemed to be standing on her side, but her attitude didn't seem like it. Moreover, she didn't believe that she didn't kill Mu Qiulan. If the Ling Long Palace Lord was standing on the side of the second judicial authorities, this attitude was obviously not right. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as something flashed past her mind. Wait a minute. Or perhaps the Ling Long Palace Lord had long seen that the people in the Ling Long Palace were in turmoil. The Ling Long Palace Lord's attitude was only directed towards the second judicial authorities. It had nothing to do with her. It could be said that this person, if it was anyone else, could do it. As long as she could make use of it to deal with the second judicial authorities, Hall Head Wei Yin and the others who already had disloyalty. She wanted to understand this point. Yi Qing Luo could finally understand the Ling Long Palace Lord's unfathomable attitude. Because of the Ling Long Palace Lord's intervention, the group of people very quickly moved to the judicial courtyard. It was extremely quiet along the way. Only the sound of careful breathing could be heard. Yi Qing Luo strolled around leisurely as she walked beside the Ling Long Palace Lord, as though she didn't care about the results of the inspection, whereas the few judicial authorities were walking behind her. And Guardian Fan, who was swaying as his legs turned into jelly. The Ling Long Palace Lord led Yi Qing Luo to the main hall of the judicial courtyard to sit down. Very quickly, a female disciple served hot tea. Yi Qing Luo raised the teacup and took a sip. The tea fragrance was rich, and it was indeed a top-grade tea. The Ling Long Palace Lord also raised the teacup as she flicked the tea leaves on the surface. Her eyes drooped, and no emotions could be seen from her gaze. The tea in the teacup was steaming hot, making her face look hazy. Miss Yi doesn't seem to care about the results of the inspection. The Ling Long Palace Lord suddenly opened her mouth as her gaze pierced through the mist, looking at Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo shook the teacup, and the water splashed in the cup as the fragrance of the tea assailed her nostrils. She laughed lightly, because the results, I'd already guessed it. The innocent are innocent. The corners of the Ling Long Hall Master's mouth seemed to faintly curl upwards. It was a very shallow smile, and her tone was somewhat mocking. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as her peripheral vision shot a glance at those few people standing by her side, as her eyes flashed with some unfathomable meaning. The innocent will be innocent. Unfortunately, there are some methods, and there's no way to guarantee that the innocent will be innocent. She put down the teacup and propped up her chin with one hand, half propping herself up on the tea table. Whether or not I can be clear, it will depend on your attitude, Palace Master. The Ling Long Palace Lord suddenly laughed. This was the first time Yi Qing Luo had seen Ling Long Palace Lord smile. She held the teacup and smiled gracefully. His laughter was clear and pleasant to the ears. Yi Qing Luo also raised her head and exchanged glances with Ling Long Palace's Hall Master, as they both laughed at the same time. His laughter caused the second judicial officer and the others to look at each other in dismay. An ominous premonition rose from the bottom of his heart, but he seemed to have thought of something as he suppressed that feeling from the bottom of his heart. Only the amiable and benevolent face of the third judicator behind him flashed a trace of undetectable, strange emotion. Yiqing Luo just drank her tea quietly, waiting for the results. Approximately 1 hour later or so, then a middle-aged woman dressed in dirty clothes and stained with blood stains walked into the main hall with a solemn expression. Second judicial officer hurriedly went up to her. "Old Sue, how is it? What poison did those few female disciples suffer from? How long was the duration of the poisoning?" Chapter 41:25. The female disciple was poisoned with a rare poison, the poison meridian grass. Just a little bit was enough to kill a person. According to the results of the examination, the female disciples were poisoned for no more than an hour. Because it was a rare and powerful poison, the poison spread throughout his body in a short period of time. The middle-aged woman read out the autopsy report. Second preceptor and the others all smiled. "I knew it. You were the one who poisoned him, weren't you? Now that the evidence is conclusive, what else can you say?" The second judicial officer sneered and pointed at Yiqing Luo. According to the duration of the poisoning, it was totally compatible with Yiqing Luo's time. It was entirely possible for Yiqing Luo to commit the crime. Basically, it was confirmed that the female disciple's death was related to Yiqing Luo. Guard Fan immediately knelt down in front of the Linglong Palace Master and said word by word, "Lord Palace Master, the truth has been revealed." This subordinate did not speak a single word of falsehood. The Linglong Palace Lord sat there and did not speak. She did not even look at Protector Fan. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. For a moment, the entire hall was filled with a strange silence. After a long while, the Grand Judge slowly walked out. She stared at Yiqing Luo, and the expression on her face was rather complicated. "Yiqing Luo, are you really the one who killed him?" The Great Judge's voice was a little tense. Yiqing Luo could tell. The Grand Judge didn't ask this because he was worried about her. Instead, he was worried about himself. Because, from the moment they found the female disciple's corpse, the Grand Inquisitor was speaking for her and had shown that he believed in her. If he was really killed by her. In front of the second judicial system, the great judicial system was considered to have lost. This was a result that the Great Justice did not want to see no matter what. What else is there to ask? Old Sue has already deduced the time of the poisoning. Second judicial judge interrupted. The time he was poisoned does not mean that Miss Yi was the one who poisoned him, unless you have evidence or saw Miss Yi poison him with your own eyes. The first judicial judge's face darkened when he heard the second judicial judge's voice. She turned her head towards Yiqing Luo and asked once again, "Miss Yi, you're not the one who killed him, right?" Before the second judicial judge could speak, the judge was asking if she was the one who killed the man. Now, the judge was asking whether she was the one who killed him or not. Was the first judicial officer using her as a tool to deal with the second judicial officer? Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she gave a mocking smile. Seeing the sneer in her eyes, the great judge felt a little guilty. All right, don't interrogate a little girl like that." The third judicial judge had a warm smile on his face. He put one hand on the first judicial judge and the other on the second judicial judge. "It's very simple to prove that Miss Yi didn't poison him. As long as we can prove that Miss Yi doesn't have the poisonous scripture grass on her, isn't it?" "What kind of proof is this?" The second judicial judge flicked his sleeves. "After she poisoned it, she might have thrown the poisonous meridian grass away. When we rushed over with Protector Fan, it happened to be the time when the female disciples died. During that time, she didn't have the time to destroy the evidence," the third judicial judge said. "So this point can still be proven." When the second judicial judge heard this, he turned his head and snorted coldly, but he didn't refute. Third judicial judge beamed at Yiqing Luo. "Miss Yi, I'll have to trouble you to cooperate." Saying that, the three judges took the initiative to walk towards Yiqing Luo. before they even got close. Chapter 41:26. Third Judicial Magistrate stopped in his tracks and explained with a smile, "Just checking, it won't hurt you." Yiqing Luo snorted lightly as she leaned against the back of the chair. She bent her elbow and propped up her chin as she looked at Third Judicial Magistrate. "No need to check." "Misty, what do you mean?" Third Judicial Magistrate asked in puzzlement. Yiqing Luo raised her brows. "I do have the poison scripture grass on me." The moment she said that, at that moment, the surrounding people all sucked in a breath of cold air. Each of them looked at Yiqing Luo in astonishment. Was this admitting? Second Judicial Magistrate laughed out loud as he looked at First Judicial Magistrate complacently. "Did you hear that? She has already admitted. Ha ha ha. First Judicial Magistrate, you have been helping a murderer, and the person she killed is from Linglong Palace." Second Judicial Magistrate paused and sneered. "For what I see, you, First Judicial Magistrate, don't treat our Linglong Palace's disciples seriously." First Judicial Magistrate's face darkened. She clenched her fists tightly to suppress the rising heat as she stared coldly at Second Judicial Magistrate. She wanted to refute, but couldn't say a word. Second Judicial Magistrate felt even more annoyed when he saw this. He cupped his fists tightly and knelt down in front of Linglong Palace Master. "Palace Master, this person has hurt our Linglong Palace's disciples many times. Now that the evidence is conclusive, would Palace Master please give the order to kill Yiqing Luo?" This. Third Judicial Magistrate was shocked as he wanted to persuade Second Judicial Magistrate. But he looked at Yiqing Luo helplessly. Finally, he sighed heavily. "Miss Yi, how can you do this? If you have any dissatisfaction with Linglong Palace, you can tell the First Judicial Magistrate clearly." As she said that, she closed her eyes with a pained look. "That is at least a fresh life, and so young. I can't plead for you anymore." "Plead for what?" "Men, suppress this murderer who killed Linglong Palace's disciples. We must use her blood to pay tribute to the dead disciples." Second Judicial Magistrate clamored. In this heavy atmosphere, a melodious laugh rang out. It was extremely obvious. Everyone was stunned by this laughter. He immediately looked in the direction of the voice. The girl sitting on the chair covered her lips with her slender, jade-like hand. She was smiling so brightly that it was as if she was a beautiful flower. A pair of enchanting eyes curved into a long and narrow arc because of her smile. It was like a poppy in full bloom, slowly blooming at the end of his eyes. The girl slowly sat up straight. Her posture was elegant and noble. His every movement exuded an aura that caused others to tremble in fear. "What are you laughing at?" The second judge frowned and scolded. Yiqing Luo curled her lips and smiled sweetly. "I can't help but want to laugh at your words." "What do you mean?" Yiqing Luo's eyes were full of ridicule. "Those who don't know would think that my relationship with the third judicial officer is so good. It seems that from the beginning to the end, other than putting all the blame on me, you haven't done anything to plead for me, have you?" She made no effort to hide her sarcasm. It also directly moved the purpose of the tripartite justice system to the surface. "Don't you like to pretend to be a good person? Don't you like to smooth things over?" Then he would expose all of her intentions. Let's see how she could continue to pretend. As expected, the amiable and kind face of the third judicial judge suddenly froze. Her mouth moved. Chapter 41:27. "Miss Yi, do you have any misunderstanding towards me?" The third judicial magistrate adjusted his emotions and asked. Yiqing Luo's slender fingers brushed over her lips. Immediately, she stood up slowly. The moment she stood up, the powerful and majestic aura emanated from her body. Obviously, she looked petite and harmless, but in her charming eyes and smile, it made one's back inexplicably cold. Yiqing Luo curled her red lips. "Whether it's a misunderstanding or not, you know it clearly." "Miss Yi." The third judicial magistrate's face stiffened and his expression was extremely ugly. "I am absolutely not that kind of person. Puffed. Yi Qing Luo's pink lips deepened. The corners of her long and narrow eyes revealed a trace of coldness, like a stream of ice and snow. I have no interest in what kind of person you are. She said, it's just disgusting that you're putting on airs in front of me. If you like to maintain your good guy image, then stay away from me. The third judicial magistrate was infuriated. A murderous intent surged uncontrollably in his pair of dark eyes, although it quickly disappeared in front of his eyes. But this murderous intent, Yi Qing Luo could still see it clearly. She curved her lips. She couldn't control her emotions and couldn't help it. Her psychological quality was still too poor. Yi Qing Luo. The second judicial magistrate stepped forward and pulled the third judicial magistrate behind him, then stared at Yi Qing Luo angrily. What kind of person is the third judicial magistrate? We Linglong Palace know best. Don't think that you can bewitch the first judicial magistrate and sow discord between us and the third judicial magistrate. She sneered. Her eyes were filled with hatred. Don't think that deliberately targeting the third judicial magistrate, you can overturn the fact that you killed 4 Linglong Palace's female disciples. The moment the second judicial magistrate finished his words, immediately, those Linglong Palace's female disciples who were surrounding the main hall were suddenly enlightened. This was Yi Qing Luo's purpose, deliberately provoking the feelings between the judicial magistrates, and then using this to shift everyone's attention away from the new female disciples. Indeed, a sinister and cunning woman. Suddenly, among the female disciples, someone knelt down. She shouted loudly, "Hall Master, please uphold justice for Linglong Palace." The moment the words came out, the dozens of female disciples surrounding them were immediately spurred on. In addition to what the second judicial officer had just said, one by one, they knelt on the ground. "Hall Master, please uphold justice. Hall Master, please avenge our dead sisters. Hall Master." For a moment, the strangely silent hall became noisy. When the second preceptor saw that there were so many female disciples cooperating with him, he immediately felt very confident. He raised his head high and sneered at the big hand. "Take him away." Soon, the female guard rushed into the hall. One by one, they bowed towards Linglong Palace Lord, who was seated on the main seat, and went up to detain Yi Qing Luo. However, they had just taken a step forward. A cold and mocking voice sounded. "So, in your eyes, I am still the Hall Master. You even know about me." Every single word was heard clearly by his ears. It was as if a heavy boulder was pounding on everyone's heart. The moment the Palace Lord of the Linglong Palace spoke, at that moment, the entire hall fell silent. The expressions of the second judge, Protector Fan, and the others who had been arrogant and pleased with themselves froze on their faces. Everyone's heart thumped furiously. Hall Master, what did this mean? Under the strange atmosphere, it was silent for several breaths. Chapter 41:28. Second Judicator knelt down. That frightened the surrounding Linglong Palace's female disciples all knelt down. Hence, it was the same as before. Everyone knelt down on the ground. Yi Qing Luo stood out like a crane among chickens. Her lips curled up as she slowly turned sideways and smiled at Linglong Palace Lord. "Actually, I also feel that. They are treating you as a decoration." Yi Qing Luo, second judicator, shouted angrily, "Stop spouting nonsense over there." After he shouted, he immediately looked at the Linglong Palace Lord with fear and trepidation. "We are absolutely loyal to the Palace Lord. She's the one who's sowing discord." Yi Qing Luo smiled as she raised her slender eyebrows. The smile in her eyes added some unknown, deeper meaning. "Really? Why is it that when I'm here listening to your long-winded talk, I feel? Second Judicator, you are more like the Linglong Palace Lord." Yi Qing Luo's tone was frivolous. She said it in a casual manner, but the words between the words made one's heart palpitate. Second Judicator was so frightened that his face turned pale. "Yi Qing Luo, don't slander me. You're intentionally discrediting me in front of Lord Palace Lord." She was more like the Linglong Palace Lord. If these words were said in private, she would absolutely be filled with delight. She had always felt that she was the one who could truly take up the position of Ling Long Palace Lord. But these words were placed in the open, especially in front of Ling Long Palace Lord. If she provoked Ling Long Palace Lord to think too much, Ling Long Palace Lord started to be suspicious of her. Could her days in Ling Long Palace Lord still be smooth sailing? Yi Qing Luo, that slut, how ruthless! Second Judicator was so infuriated that his chest felt stuffy, about to throw up blood. Lord Palace Lord, I'm innocent. She's intentionally sowing discord, you mustn't believe. Enough! Ling Long Palace Lord squinted her eyes in displeasure, reflecting a chilly glint, like ice and snow, freezing the surrounding air. Ling Long Palace Lord's expression turned ugly. A pair of eyes that seemed to be covered with frost contained a bit of inexplicable coldness. After stopping the second trial, she raised her eyes and met Yi Qing Luo's gaze as she spoke out coldly. You, enough. Stop stirring up trouble over there. Yi Qing Luo shrugged her shoulders, raised her hand, and made a zipper action on her mouth. After that, he pursed his lips and returned to his seat beside the Ling Long Palace Lord. Lord Hall Master. The second Hall Master shrunk his neck. The Ling Long Palace Lord glanced at the second and third judges indifferently before raising her eyes and sweeping her gaze over the people kneeling on the ground in front of her. All of you are making a ruckus over a little girl. Where is your sense of propriety? No one dared to make a sound. The Ling Long Palace Master's gaze was sharp, and the pressure of a superior person pressed down heavily. The air in the entire lobby became thin. Everyone felt suffocated. However, he did not dare to show any emotions. Fear was written all over everyone's face. Only Yi Qing Luo, who was seated by the side, still had that lazy expression on her face, as though she didn't care about anything. Su Xiao. Ling Long Palace Lord opened her mouth again. Su Xiao, who was kneeling by the side, the lady in charge of the autopsy, responded, I'm here. Check if Miss Ye's body has been contaminated with the poison scripture grass. Ling Long Palace Lord instructed calmly. Su Xiao kowtowed expressionlessly. Yes. Following that, she stood up and walked towards Yi Qing Luo. This time, Yi Qing Luo didn't evade. She was extremely cooperative. Chapter 41-29. After the inspection, Su Xiao returned to his original position and continued to kneel down. How is it? Ling Long Palace Lord asked. Su Xiao replied respectfully. I did not find any traces of the poison scripture grass on Missy. Ling Long Palace Lord's gaze swept towards Second Judicial Magistrate. Second Judicial Magistrate. Did you hear me clearly? Second Judicial Magistrate shuddered. Yes, I heard you clearly. Su Xiao. The Ling Long Palace Master softly called out. Su Xiao seemed to understand the meaning of the Ling Long Palace Master's words. He expressionlessly said, the poison meridian grass is extremely poisonous. So if someone comes into contact with the poison meridian grass, their body will definitely be contaminated with its aura. No matter how careful the person who poisoned it is, there would definitely be traces on their body. Su Xiao's explanation, which meant that Yi Qing Luo's disgust was completely excluded. Second Judicial Magistrate raised his head and widened his eyes as he pointed at Yi Qing Luo. You are intentionally framing me. Rejecting the third Judicial Magistrate's inspection and admitting that she had the poisoned scripture grass on her. Intentionally teasing them. Yi Qing Luo shook her head with a grin. What I said is the truth. I do have the poisoned scripture grass on me, but I didn't take it out. She touched the Netherworld Phoenix ring on her fingertip. As for me, not only do I have the poisoned scripture grass, but I also have many other poisons that you can name or can't name. Do you want to try? Do you want to try? She was a pill master. If she didn't have some random poison on her, she would be embarrassed to call herself a pill master, all right? Second Judicial Magistrate's face twitched as his breathing quickened. His face was green, red, and black. Palace Lord. The reversal of the situation made First Judicial Magistrate smile. She crawled a few steps forward and cupped her hands towards Ling Long Palace Lord. The 4 new female disciples died because of the poisoned scripture grass. Since Miss Ye's innocence has been confirmed, the murderer must be someone else. She pointed to Second Judicial Magistrate. After the news was released, Second Judicial Magistrate had been insisting that Miss Yi was the murderer who poisoned the female disciples. I feel that Second Judicial Magistrate and Guardian Fan are trying to frame Miss Yi, so I suggest that Su Xiao also checks Second Judicial Magistrate and Guardian Fan. Nonsense. Second Judicial Magistrate stared at First Judicial Magistrate in anger. How could this elder poison my own disciple? Whether it's you or not, we'll know after the inspection. The Great Justice snorted. Fine, I'll check. The second judge glared angrily at Su Xiao. You check. Make him sincerely convinced. Su Xiao looked at the Ling Long Palace Master. The Palace Master of the Ling Long Palace nodded. He stood up and walked towards the Second Judicial Elder. Second Judicial Elder, please excuse me. Su Xiao stretched out his hand towards the Second Judicial Officer. Suddenly, a cry of surprise rang out from the crowd. Guardian Fan. Protector Fan is dead. What's going on? How did Guard Fan die? The female guards kneeling on the ground looked at Protector Fan, who had suddenly fallen, and let out panicked cries. It's poison. She took poison. Poison meridian grass. After Nurse Fan fell to the ground, she slowly saw a patch of purplish-black color spread over her face, just like the 4 female disciples who had died earlier. Protector Fan's death shocked everyone. Su Xiao immediately walked towards Guard Fan and felt her pulse. After a while, she shook her head at Linglong Palace Lord. Guard Fan consumed the poison scripture grass and died from the poison. The poison scripture grass was found on her fingers. This was because Su Xiao wanted to check her and Second Judicial Magistrate. Chapter 41:30. Second Judicial Officer had quick reflexes. After realizing this point, she immediately changed her expression as she looked at Guardian Fan's corpse in astonishment. It's her. She poisoned those 4 female disciples. Second Judicial Officer panted heavily as her hands trembled as she pointed at Guardian Fan, before her eyes widened as she looked at Third Judicial Officer. We were all cheated. The tripartite judicial system was also stunned by the sudden change in the scene before them. After hearing what Second Judicial Officer said, only then did she come back to her senses. She immediately kowtowed to Linglong Palace Lord. Palace Lord, it's Guardian Fan. Guardian Fan made use of us. Everyone was taken aback when they heard this, looking at the 2 judicial officers kneeling on the ground and then at Guardian Fan's corpse. It seemed, right from the start, it was indeed Guardian Fan who swore that she saw Yi Qing Luo bullying the female disciples. Then she specially looked for the judicial elder to stop Yi Qing Luo. But she coincidentally saw the scene of the female disciples collapsing at Yi Qing Luo's feet. From then on, they all felt that the murderer was Yi Qing Luo. So, from the start to the end, it was all Guardian Fan's doing? She herself poisoned the female disciples and shifted the blame to Yi Qing Luo? In this way, everything could be explained clearly. Linglong Palace Lord looked quietly at the 2 people kneeling on the ground. Her expression was indifferent. He really couldn't tell what she was thinking in her heart. Linglong Palace Lord remained silent. Second Judicial Officer and Third Judicial Officer were feeling apprehensive. Linglong Palace Lord remained silent. The others in the main hall didn't dare to speak either. The atmosphere was so strange that it started to fill the air. It was so oppressive that everyone felt suffocated. Then, the Linglong Palace's palace master's finger lightly tapped on the table. A soft dong sound was heard. Like a bell, it fell on everyone's heart. Usually, your thoughts are deeper than the other. The palace master of the Linglong Palace chuckled, and a sharp light flashed in her eyes. A mere palace master is able to play you all around. This makes this palace master have no choice but to reconsider whether you all have the ability to take on such an important role as justice. Linglong Palace Lord's words were spoken very softly, but it was a tone that could not be refuted. When the second judicial judge and the third judicial judge heard this, they were so shocked that they felt as if a boulder was pounding on their chests. Their fingers curled up and their bodies tensed up. Palace Master, we are only concerned about the Linglong Palace and the chaos. After this lesson, we definitely won't do it again next time." As they spoke, the two of them kowtowed to the ground. Ever since Yi Qing Luo arrived at Linglong Palace, the Linglong Palace Lord's attitude was obviously not right. From the very beginning, they had a feeling the Linglong Palace's palace masters seemed to want to make a move on them, the main hall's hall masters. However, a guess was just a guess. Hearing the palace master of the Linglong Palace mention that they would be considering their positions, it was a completely different feeling. They had spent most of their lives in the Linglong Palace. If they were to be stripped of their judicial positions now, what face would they have left to remain in the Linglong Palace Hall? Linglong Palace Lord's gaze unnoticeably shot a glance at Yi Qing Luo as she spoke calmly. "The person whom you need to apologize to is not me." Second judicial officer's body stiffened as he abruptly looked towards Yi Qing Luo. In the depths of his eyes, a hurricane was surging. Chapter 41:31. On the other hand, third judicial magistrate immediately put on a smile and turned her kneeling position towards Yi Qing Luo. "Misty, I'm old and muddled, believing in Guardian fans' nonsense. So, I misunderstood you." Her voice trembled slightly, and her tone was apologetic at the right time. She knew when to yield and when to stand tall. Third judicial magistrate's apology made second judicial magistrate's expression stiffen. Asking her to apologize to a stinky lass who was still wet behind the ears? How could she possibly do it? Second judicial magistrate's entire being was resisting to apologize to Yi Qing Luo. But when she raised her head and wanted to express her grievances to Linglong Palace Lord, she met with Linglong Palace Lord's sharp gaze. That heavy gaze made second judicial magistrate's heart tighten. His pupils dilated unconsciously. Finally, under the humiliation and unwillingness, she slowly moved her direction and knelt towards Yi Qing Luo, only before she could squeeze out an apology from the slits of her teeth. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled upwards as she gave a lazy smile. "There's no need to apologize." Second judicial magistrate swallowed back the words that were about to come out of her mouth as she silently thought. At least she had some eyesight. She knew that she couldn't accept her apology. This thought had just flashed past her mind. She heard the young lady's next sentence, which was mixed with a clear and melodious laughter. "Apologies against one's conscience. I've heard too many of them, and it's scary. I don't want to face 10 overkillers when I wake up at night." She put on a posture as she patted her chest. "As for me, I'm just a weak young lady, and I'm very timid, so I'll be afraid." Second judicial magistrate's face instantly turned gloomy upon hearing Yi Qing Luo's words. Her body stiffened as her eyes stared unblinkingly at Yi Qing Luo. The bottom of her eyes was filled with viciousness. "Miss Yi, how could this be an apology against one's conscience?" Third judicial magistrate's amiable voice was heard as she leaned forward and bumped into second judicial magistrate imperceptibly, reminding her. Immediately after, he looked at Yi Qing Luo with an amiable smile. "This matter is indeed my and second judicial officer's fault. We are also sincerely apologizing. We should not just listen to what we see on the surface and make arbitrary judgments. This matter has also taught us a heavy lesson. If Miss Ye's anger cannot be appeased, we are willing to accept punishment as our apology to you, and the tuition fees for this training." The third judicial judge's words were very beautiful. His feelings were deep and sincere. It sounded like a sincere apology. He also made it clear that he was wrong. It also showed that through this lesson, he had reflected on it and would definitely correct himself. In that case, this was also a hint to the palace master of the Linglong Palace not to give up their positions so easily. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled upwards. Her eyes were extremely clear. He was not affected by the words of the third judicial judge at all. She still held her chin lazily, raised her slender eyebrows, and looked at them with a faint smile. That look. It was obvious mockery. The second justice was already filled with resentment. After seeing Yi Qing Luo's expression, he was even more unresigned. "Yi Qing Luo, why must you be so overbearing? We've already apologized. What more do you want? She was extremely infuriated as she shouted harshly. This sharp shout, instantly, it caused all movement around to quiet down. The third judicial judge's smiling face froze. She really wanted to kick this pig-like teammate to death. Chapter 41:32. Actual harm? Yiqing Luo couldn't help but burst out laughing. Bringing me to Ling Long Palace Hall without any explanation, and then your mysterious fairy came looking for trouble, and then inexplicably framing me. Her long and narrow eyes rose slightly, forming an arc with a layer of coldness. I am after all a 15-year-old young lady. The trauma to my heart is greater than anything else. You. The second judicial officer trembled in anger when she heard this obvious nonsense. If Yiqing Luo's heart was hurt, she wouldn't believe it even if she was beaten to death. Even if her heart was hurt, Yiqing Luo wouldn't feel any trauma at all. The second judicial officer was speechless. The third judicial officer lowered her head as her eyes sunk slightly. A cold glint flashed across his covered eyes. How could she not hear it? Yiqing Luo's words were intentionally conveying her grievance to the Lord of Ling Long Palace Hall. Grievance? When had Yiqing Luo ever been wronged? If it wasn't for Yiqing Luo, who took the initiative to follow the judicial officer to Ling Long Palace Hall. Based on Yiqing Luo's character, who could bring her to Ling Long Palace Hall? This was also why. Since Yiqing Luo arrived at Ling Long Palace Hall yesterday, she was arranged to stay next to the judicial courtyard, and the judicial officer would occasionally go over to Yiqing Luo. Moreover, yesterday, Wu Fu'er came looking for trouble. Wasn't she carried down in the end? And Yiqing Luo didn't receive any punishment. Instead, it was Wu Fu'er who almost lost her life, and even implicated Hall Master Wu Yin to be punished. Today, the so-called framing. Yiqing Luo was an outsider right from the start. She was in a state of watching a show from the start, completely sure that she was safe and sound. She had the cheek to say that she was wronged. The ones who were wronged were them, right? But no matter how turbulent the third judicial officer's heart was, they were unable to calm down. At this moment, they didn't open their mouths to express any feelings. Miss Yi. Suddenly, the Lord of Ling Long Palace Hall opened her mouth slowly. Her voice was deep and cold, without any ripples. Yiqing Luo raised her brows as she looked at the Lord of Ling Long Palace Hall. It seems that Miss Yi has a lot of complaints about the Ling Long Palace, said the Ling Long Palace Lord in a very calm voice. Yiqing Luo raised her eyebrows as she raised her teacup and took a sip. After the Ling Long Palace Master asked that question, the entire hall was dead silent. Yiqing Luo lifted the cup, and the sound of the teacups colliding against each other was extremely clear. Everyone couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. It was until Yiqing Luo placed the teacup down when she met Ling Long Palace Lord's gaze with a smile. That's right, there are a lot of complaints. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. In front of the master. Even if he had complaints in his heart, he couldn't say it out loud. Everyone looked at the Ling Long Palace Lord with trepidation, fearing that the Ling Long Palace Lord would fly into a rage. Unexpectedly, the Ling Long Palace Lord laughed in a low voice. The smile on her face, which she pretended to be old and mature, actually showed a little bit of her beauty. Since that is the case, this palace master will have to take responsibility for it, said the Ling Long Palace Master with a light smile. Just as she finished speaking, her gaze suddenly changed. She coldly swept her gaze over the people kneeling in front of her. As members of the judiciary, you listened to slanderous rumors and injured others without any evidence. Furthermore, you have no intention of repenting. Chapter 41:33. Second judicial officer's eyes were filled with shock as she looked at Ling Long Palace Lord in disbelief. She opened her mouth wide as she couldn't believe what she had heard. However, the Ling Long Palace's palace master's ice-cold expression and frost-like gaze that landed on her body caused the doubts and unwillingness in her heart to become stuck in her throat. It was like that icy cold gaze grabbed her by the throat, making her unable to say a single word. Ling Long Palace Lord's icy cold gaze slowly shifted onto the third judicial officer. That serene gaze made the third judicial officer tremble as her entire body tensed up as she knelt straight. Linglong Palace Lord stared at the third judicial officer as she spoke in a deep voice. Third judicial officer, on account that you have a good attitude in admitting your mistake, you shall face the wall and reflect on your mistakes. After you have thought it through, come see me again. The third judicial officer's eyes were filled with gratitude as she immediately knelt down as her forehead pressed against the ground. Her voice was trembling as she replied in ecstasy, "Thank you, Palace Lord." Following that, she shifted towards Yi Qing Luo's direction. "Thank you, Miss Yi." After thanking Yi Qing Luo, she slowly raised her head as she was filled with gratitude as she used a sonorous and forceful voice to speak. "I am willing to go to Linglong Palace Hall to copy Buddhist scriptures, to wash away my vicious aura, and also to pray for Palace Lord and Miss Yi." Third judicial officer's sincere and serious words. Compared to the shock and astonishment on the second judicial officer's face, as well as that venomous gaze towards Yi Qing Luo, it formed a sharp contrast. After the third judicial officer expressed her attitude, Linglong Palace Lord's red lips curled slightly as she looked at Yi Qing Luo. "Miss Yi, feel that what I have done is considered as being responsible for you." Since Linglong Palace Lord opened her mouth, Yi Qing Luo crossed her arms as she leaned against the back of the chair lazily. Her long and narrow eyes squinted slightly as her brows exuded a bewitching look. Especially now, when she heard Linglong Palace Lord's question, she slightly turned her eyes sideways. That exquisite side profile made one's heart palpitate. But that palpitate revealed a kind of nervousness which made their hearts tighten abruptly. Yi Qing Luo lazily lifted her eyelids as her lips curled upward slightly as she looked at Linglong Palace Lord with a smile, which didn't look like a smile. If Palace Lord feels that this is considered, then so be it. She naturally understood the reason behind the Linglong Palace Master's actions, although the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace seemed to be helping her on the surface. But in the end, she was the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace. Compared to an outsider like her, the disciples of the Linglong Palace were the ones that the Linglong Palace Master wanted to protect. In order to give her an explanation, and to protect the disciples of the Linglong Palace, the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace had purposely taken the initiative to propose the punishment for the two judges. Moreover, the punishment was neither light nor heavy. In any case, he had spared their lives, even though the Linglong Palace's Palace Master had made it sound so serious. The truth was that she had managed to protect those two's judicial positions. The moment the Linglong Palace Master opened her mouth, she even mentioned the punishment. From Yi Qing Luo's standpoint, she should be filled with gratitude, thanking the Linglong Palace Lord for being willing to step forward to settle this matter. Then, he agreed to Linglong Palace Master's punishment. In this way, everything that the second and third judicial authorities had done to her was written off. Both of their positions were saved. This was a good plan, but the Linglong Palace Master had calculated wrongly. She, Yi Qing Luo, wasn't someone who would follow the steps and walk down. If she agreed to it this time, it would only make the Linglong Palace feel that she was easy to talk to, easy to bully. Chapter 41-34. Yi Qing Luo wasn't in the mood to tangle with the people from Linglong Palace, especially when the Linglong Palace Lord mentioned half a month's time to reflect on her mistakes. It was pure nonsense. Half a month later, she would no longer be in Linglong Palace. Whether the second judicial officer had any repentance or not wasn't all up to Linglong Palace Lord. But this was after all the punishment which the Linglong Palace Lord had personally set. If she were to reject it hastily, it would only cause the Linglong Palace Lord to be unhappy with her. In other people's territory, it was better to be more obedient. Therefore, her answer was already very implicit. She gave the Linglong Palace Lord some face and also hinted that even if she agreed to the suggestion which the Linglong Palace Lord suggested, it was because she was unwilling and unwilling. As expected, after hearing Yi Qing Luo's reply, The Linglong Palace Lord's expression sunk slightly. Her lips curled into a smile as her legs slumped down. Then, based on Miss Ye's opinion, what should we do? Almost every single word was spat out from the Linglong Palace Lord with a tone of gnashing her teeth. Her entire face was almost covered with a patch of black. As long as Miss Yi can forgive our disrespectful actions, I am willing to accept any punishment. The third judicial officer spoke out at the same time. His tone was filled with sincerity and determination. One of them was suppressing his anger. Another was apologizing sincerely. No matter how they looked at it, they felt that Yiqing Luo really didn't know what was good for her. The surrounding female disciples' hearts were about to jump out of their throats. This was the first time they had seen such an arrogant and daring person in their entire lives. To everyone, the punishment which the Linglong Palace Lord had suggested was already very heavy. This was totally because she cared about Yiqing Luo, hence she punished the two judicial officers in this way. But not only did Yiqing Luo not accept the Linglong Palace Lord's good intentions, she even put on a reluctant expression. Could it be that their third judicial officers weren't humble enough? Could it be that Yiqing Luo wanted all the disciples of Linglong Palace to kneel down in front of her to plead for mercy? Everyone's gaze towards Yiqing Luo was filled with disgust and displeasure. The surrounding people's emotions. Yiqing Luo naturally felt it. But she didn't even have any reaction when the Linglong Palace Lord's expression changed, not to mention caring about those people's emotions. Yiqing Luo touched her smooth and exquisite chin as her pink lips slowly curled upwards. He looked at the three judges with a faint smile. This third judicial judge was truly a talent. He knew when to yield and when to stand tall. He completely cooperated with the Linglong Palace Master. His attitude of admitting his mistake was sincere. He took the initiative to invite them to the ancestral hall, and even copied Buddhist scriptures. As the person involved, she was almost touched by the sincere apology of the three judicial authorities. Since Linglong Palace's hall master has personally come forward, I naturally follow the host's wishes as a guest. Yiqing Luo replied with a smile, as her face was filled with an indifferent smile. The Linglong Palace Master's face sank. Yiqing Luo's voice rang once again, but I have another matter which I need to trouble Linglong Palace Lord with. Why would Miss Yi bother the Linglong Palace? The Linglong Palace Master smiled coldly. Facing the Linglong Palace Master's ridiculing tone, Yiqing Luo's expression didn't change. I just arrived at the Linglong Palace yesterday and don't know Protector Fan at all. She can't possibly frame me for no reason, and even want my life. If you say there's no one else behind this, I don't believe it. When Yiqing Luo's words were clearly transmitted into everyone's ears, instantly it set off a raging wave, like a huge rock smashing into a calm lake. Chapter 41:35. You're arrogant and domineering, arrogant and egotistical. Framing and framing is because Guardian Fan can't stand you. Second judicial judge blamed Yiqing Luo for his punishment. The moment he said it, it was a sharp ridicule. Yiqing Luo couldn't help but burst out laughing. Her long and narrow eyes were curved upwards. So, Linglong Palace Hall can't stand someone, so you want to frame the other party. TSK, I really feel bitterly disappointed for those disciples who were wronged by you. You're spouting nonsense. Second judicial judge's face flushed red as he was infuriated, but he couldn't refute Yiqing Luo at all. Yiqing Luo blinked innocently. What's the matter, second judicial judge? I'm just following what you said and deduced. Is there anything wrong with that? Second judicial judge's chest heaved up and down as he clenched his fists. Yiqing Luo, you! Shut up. Linglong Palace Lord's sleeves moved. A gust of wind swept towards second judicial judge's face. Second judicial judge cried out miserably as he was sent flying by that gust of wind and fell heavily onto the ground. Since second judicial judge refuses to accept my punishment, then, from today onwards, second judicial judge will be stripped of his judicial position. Linglong Palace Lord was obviously angry as his tone was filled with chilliness. Second judicial judge spat out blood as his throat was filled with a fishy sweetness, without any energy to speak. Linglong Palace Lord restrained his emotions and looked towards Yiqing Luo as he said word by word. Miss Ye's request. I will try my best to do it. I will personally investigate this matter. Are you satisfied with this, Miss Yi? Yiqing Luo's long and narrow eyes rose as she smiled. Since Palace Lord is so reasonable, I can rest assured. Then I'll have to trouble Palace Lord. Linglong Palace Lord flicked his sleeves as he turned around and left the main hall. Before he left, his cold gaze swept past the two judicial judges who were kneeling on the ground. His expression was as cold as ice. The next moment, he flicked his sleeves again and left without turning back. Second judicial judge seemed to have lost all his energy as he staggered and fell onto the ground. A big mouthful of blood flowed down her chin and onto her robe. Her eyes were wide open, unable to recover from the huge change. The third judicial judge glanced at the second judicial judge and slowly stood up from the ground. She cupped her fists towards Yiqing Luo and left the main hall. Everyone present was silent for a while. He was still unable to recover from the shock just now. Did the temple master directly remove the second judicial officer from his position? The current second judicial system was no longer the second judicial system. There was a portion of them who were even more curious towards Yiqing Luo. It was rumored that this young lady named Yiqing Luo was the murderer who killed Ling Long Palace's mysterious maiden. This trip to Ling Long Palace was to investigate the truth behind Yiqing Luo killing Ling Long Palace's profound maiden. Why would the temple master be so fearful of her? Yes, it was fear. In everyone's eyes, the palace master was an extremely cold woman. There was basically nothing that could affect her emotions. But in front of Yiqing Luo, the palace master had given in repeatedly. He had also agreed to Yiqing Luo's request several times. What on earth was going on? Because of the Linglong Palace Master's attitude, everyone's attitude towards Yiqing Luo had an earth-shattering change. Chapter 41:36. The minute this sentence was said, those female guards who were originally searching Yiqing Luo's body for the poisonous scripture grass, they changed their direction and swarmed towards the second judicial magistrate. They lifted her up and swiftly walked out of the main hall. The second judicial magistrate was first stunned, and when she was lifted up by a few female guards, she immediately started cursing out in embarrassment. But her mouth was directly gagged. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she watched the second judicial magistrate's figure disappear before she slowly retracted her gaze. She ignored the surrounding people, casting various gazes at her. She directly walked back to her own room, towards the Lord of Linglong Palace's attitude towards her. Yiqing Luo was more or less surprised. She didn't know if it was because she was afraid of her Overlord's woman title, or there was some other motive. But regarding the Lord of Linglong Palace's punishment towards those two judicial magistrates, Yiqing Luo actually didn't put a heart, because these two judicial magistrates had at least 20 years of online experience in Linglong Palace, and also had a portion of their own power. The Lord of Linglong Palace would absolutely not break the balance of Linglong Palace because of her. The punishment now was merely a superficial act, putting on a show for her. Perhaps tomorrow, that second judicial magistrate would come knocking on her door and apologize again. Following that, the Lord of Linglong Palace would say something else. This matter would then be left unsettled. Otherwise, the Lord of Linglong Palace wouldn't have said that it was only to let the second judicial magistrate reflect for half a month. If it wasn't for the fact that the second judicial magistrate's actions were a slap on the Lord of Linglong Palace's face, the Lord of Linglong Palace wouldn't be so angry at the end. Yiqing Luo just pushed the door and entered the room. The expression on her face had some subtle changes. She silently turned around and closed the door. Following that, she walked into the inner room with light footsteps. As expected, a slender figure stood in the middle of the inner room. That man was dressed in a black robe, covering his entire body. Hearing footsteps, that man turned around, and the black eyes under the black robe stared at Yiqing Luo. "What are you here for again?" Yiqing Luo walked forward, past that man, and sat on a chair by the side. That person stared at Yiqing Luo for a long time. His voice was deep. I want to see you. Yiqing Luo's hand, which was holding the teacup, shook a little. Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace. Are you too bored because you have nothing better to do? She simply put down the teacup and looked at that person with a faint smile. Logically speaking, your Palace of Darkness is not having an easy time now. Are you really that free to come to Linglong Palace so many times? She paused for a moment, then lifted her elbow and supported her chin. She giggled, or should I say, Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace. Your mission is in this Linglong Hall, right? Master doesn't know that I'm here. The Palace Master of Gloomy Palace shook her head. I'm just worried about you. Yiqing Luo didn't believe his words. Which one of his actions wasn't inspired by someone else? How could the true mastermind of the Dark Shadow Palace not know his every move? In front of her, he was always affectionate, as if he really loved her till the end of time. Doesn't your teeth ache? She felt sour all over. It doesn't matter if you believe me or not. I know very well what I'm doing. The Palace Master of Gloomy Palace saw the ridicule in Yiqing Luo's eyes. He pursed his lips as his voice sounded a little hoarse. The pitch-black eyes under the black robe also had an extremely faint layer of dimness. Chapter 41:37. Yiqing Luo couldn't help but laughed. These words, are they what that person asked you to say? No. Palace Lord of Abyss Palace clenched his fists tightly as his black robe revealed a pair of tranquil black eyes. I'm serious. If you continue to stay in Linglong Palace, I'm afraid you will not be able to leave this place in future. Yiqing Luo raised her brows. How do you know? I know you don't believe me. He laughed bitterly. But have you ever thought about why you've been in Linglong Palace for one day and one night? Your brothers and Overlord still haven't rushed over to Linglong Palace. When he mentioned the two words, Overlord, he was obviously conflicted. Yiqing Luo's eyes flickered slightly as she maintained a calm expression. What do you mean? The surroundings of Linglong Palace has already set up an enchantment. Even if your brothers knew that you've been brought away by Linglong Palace's judicial officer, they wouldn't be able to find you. Speaking of this, his tone was filled with unwillingness, but he had no choice but to continue. Based on the Overlord's ability, if he knew that you've disappeared after going to Linglong Palace, he would definitely disregard everything to find you. But he still hasn't appeared. Haven't you thought about these problems? Yiqing Luo remained silent. She had naturally thought about these problems before, but she didn't think about it in detail. With the profound Phoenix Ring and profound Dragon Ring's connection, it shouldn't be difficult for DMO Xian to find her, unless the mastermind of Palace of Abyss had interfered. This thought flashed past her mind, and Yiqing Luo's pupils suddenly contracted as she stared at the man in front of her. Palace of Abyss. Collaborated with Linglong Palace? She asked this question out loud, but Yiqing Luo still felt that something was amiss. If Linglong Palace really collaborated with Palace of Abyss, why was it that she couldn't sense any evil qi in Linglong Palace? No matter if it was the second judicial officer or the third judicial officer, there wasn't any remnant of the evil qi on them. No, he only spat out two words, and without any other explanation, he urged again, believe me this once, and leave Linglong Palace now. I don't want you to get hurt again. Towards his denial, Yiqing Luo was still suspicious. To tell the truth, she had guessed right from the start that there was some special connection between Linglong Palace and Palace of Abyss. The Chief Justice of the Linglong Palace brought her to the Linglong Palace. Yiqing Luo had been guessing that it was possible that Secluded Palace was making use of Linglong Hall to delay her time. But now, the Palace Master of the Secluded Darkness Palace wanted her to leave the Linglong Palace immediately. This was a little thought-provoking. Yiqing Luo remained silent for a moment, as her pink lips pursed slightly and an extremely faint smile surfaced. You said Linglong Palace will be in danger, and it has nothing to do with Secluded Darkness Palace. Then you should at least tell me, what danger does this Linglong Palace have? The Palace Master of Secluded Darkness Palace did not reply immediately. He lowered his head in silence. The black robe on his head covered his entire face. His entire body exuded an aura of conflict and struggle. Yiqing Luo didn't rush him. The two of them remained silent. After a long time, only then did he slowly move. He raised his head and said, "The palace master of the Linglong Palace wants to groom you to be the next palace master of the Linglong Palace." After he said that, Yiqing Luo was stunned, while the palace master of the Netherworld Palace was silent. She had imagined countless of possibilities in her mind, but she had never thought that it would be this point. Groom her to become the palace master of the Linglong Palace? Chapter 41:38. She had just arrived at the Linglong Palace Hall, and she had already caused a huge commotion. She will be the hall master? Aren't you afraid that the Linglong Palace Hall will collapse? The palace master of the Linglong Palace has taken a liking to you, and she has also taken a liking to the person behind you. The palace master of the Netherworld Palace pursed his lips, and his voice was a little hoarse. Otherwise, why do you think she would tolerate you so much? She's just trying to lower your guard against her. He paused for a moment before continuing. Do you know why the Linglong Palace was able to take root in the Earth domain for the past few hundred years? Yiqing Luo shook her head. Don't know. The Linglong Palace is not as miraculous as the people in the land make it out to be. It is also not as the people in the land think, where it represents justice and protects the peace of the land. He lowered his head and said in a low voice, "The existence of the Linglong Palace is nothing more than a place that specializes in finding a body that can match its power. And you have fulfilled the requirements of the Linglong Palace." This sentence sounded extremely familiar. If I remember correctly, back then, Old Lai had also mentioned the Linglong Palace to her. He had always said that the Linglong Palace was not a good place. It sounded familiar, a place to find a body that matched his strength. Those Empyrean fairies were merely puppets created by the Linglong Palace. However, Old Lai did not elaborate on the specifics. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? The palace master of the Netherworld Palace explained. You are now the successor that the Linglong Palace Master has chosen. Your body will become the puppet of the Linglong Palace Master. Puppet? It was this word again. What kind of existence was this Linglong Palace? In any case, Yiqing Luo, leave Linglong Palace first. You must not become Linglong Palace's puppet. He didn't continue speaking as he started to persuade her. In Yiqing Luo's heart, she was still pondering over what he said about the puppet and finding a compatible body. She looked up at him and asked, "How do you know about the Linglong Palace?" The palace master of the Netherworld Palace sighed. "I heard it from Master." Master, he was the person behind the scenes of the Dark Palace. He was the real culprit who had been plotting against her from behind. What that person said, Yiqing Luo expressed that she definitely had a motive. When Master mentioned the Linglong Palace, he didn't know that you were there. He only warned me not to provoke the Linglong Palace. Knowing that Yiqing Luo wouldn't believe his master, he explained. You don't know? How could that person not know her whereabouts? Yiqing Luo expressed her disbelief. Moreover, that person did not look like the kind of person who would care about his disciple. It was a strange warning. Were they really afraid that he would provoke the Linglong Palace? Or was he trying to use his mouth to make her go against the Linglong Palace? Yiqing Luo expressed her doubts. I'm telling the truth. Yiqing Luo, I took the risk of being discovered by Master, taking the risk of letting Master know that I already have a disloyal heart, to sneak into the Linglong Palace, just because I care about you. I don't want you to become a puppet of the Linglong Palace. Yiqing Luo's suspicion and silence deeply pierced his heart and his eyes. He staggered a step back. His body swayed a little. He raised one hand and pressed it on his chest. He pulled it up forcefully and raised his head. That pair of dark eyes under the black robe stared at her without blinking. Chapter 41:39. His voice was filled with sourness, as though he was choking with sobs. Somewhat painful, Yiqing Luo's face was still devoid of emotions. She looked at the man in front of her calmly, listening to his bitter and powerless words. He couldn't blame her for being too cold. But the other party was her enemy's man. He was the disciple of the person who had tried to take her life several times and struck out at her, and the people around her. Because of the person behind the scenes in secluded palace, her brothers had already suffered too much. She had also almost lost her life several times. If it wasn't for her good luck, if it wasn't for Dmo Xian's protection, she might have let that person get his way long ago. So to let her face this person in front of her, the palace lord of secluded palace on the surface, the disciple of the person behind the scenes. How could she trust her, even if he was sincere? He was sincere, not wanting her to get hurt, and taking such a huge risk to specially tell her all of this. Who could guarantee that this wasn't that person's scheme? It wasn't that she was panicking, but that person's temper was just so despicable. She had to guard against him. You still don't believe me? The young lady's silence broke his last persistence. He burst out laughing. His body staggered backwards several steps. As he laughed, his voice turned hoarse and astringent. If it was any other lady, perhaps she would be feeling heartache and guilt now. Yiqing Luo's gaze didn't change at all as she spoke calmly. You also said that the Ling Long Palace's surroundings have already formed an enchantment barrier. Even if I want to leave, there's no way, isn't it? I can bring you away. The palace lord of secluded palace suddenly raised his head as his tone was filled with joy. He took quick steps towards Yiqing Luo as he stretched out his hand in an attempt to hold her arm. Leave with me. I can bring you out. Yiqing Luo tilted her body slightly as she avoided his outstretched hand. The palace lord of secluded palace was stunned as he stared at his empty hand and slowly retracted it. His fingers tightened as his excitement and joy seemed as though it was just an illusion earlier. Yiqing Luo looked at the man whose head was hung low as she gave a low laugh. In her laughter, there were hints of ridicule. Palace lord of secluded darkness. Since you can enter and exit Ling Long Hall freely, then Xian can too, isn't that so? The body of the palace master of the Netherworld Palace suddenly stiffened. Yiqing Luo's laughter was still ringing in his ears. Thank you for your concern. I appreciate your intention, but I still want to wait for Xian to pick me up. Everyone knew that she had followed the Grand Judge to the Ling Long Palace. If she left with the palace master of secluded Darkness Palace, who knew? After leaving the Ling Long Palace, would the person behind the scenes appear? At that time, Dmo Xian would go to the Ling Long Palace to look for her. But she was in danger. The eyes of the palace master of the Netherworld Palace dimmed. His face, which was hidden under the black robe, was pitch black. He clenched his fists. Suddenly, his backhand swiftly grabbed towards Yiqing Luo's wrist. His voice was a little anxious. Every moment you stay in the Ling Long Palace is dangerous. I can't see you in danger. You don't know how terrifying the Ling Long Palace is, and don't know what kind of puppet you will become after you become the palace master of the Ling Long Palace. I must bring you away. His actions were fast and accurate, adding on to the fact that it was sudden. Yiqing Luo wasn't able to evade in time. Her wrist was locked tightly in his palm. She frowned in pain as she tried to struggle. Chapter 4140. Bam! The sound of the room door being smashed open was heard. The wooden board shattered and fell onto the ground. Trying to leave? A lady's stern voice was heard from the door. Immediately following that, Ling Long Palace Lord brought along 2 judicial officers as she rushed into the room. And outside the room, there were at least a few hundred female disciples. The current Ling Long Palace Lord's expression was gloomy as she stared deadly at the Palace Lord of secluded Darkness Palace. 3rd Judicial Officer's usual amiable face was now covered with a solemn expression. Her gaze swept past the Palace Lord of secluded Darkness Palace and subsequently fell onto Yiqing Luo. There was an obvious ridicule in her eyes, but very quickly it was replaced by anger. Is Ling Long Palace a place where you can come and go as you please? Outside the room, there were orderly footsteps as the shadows covered the sky and earth. Yiqing Luo looked through the broken door and saw a huge crowd outside the door. Thinking about it, Ling Long Palace's disciples had all gathered over here. The palace lord of the Ling Long Palace Hall had made up his mind to make her stay. Yiqing Luo's lips curled slightly as her narrow eyes squinted as she withdrew her hand from the palace lord of secluded Darkness Palace's hand. Linglong Palace Lord and the rest suddenly barged into the room, and they were aggressive. Yiqing Luo withdrew her hand and broke free from his restraints. Yiqing Luo swung her hand and raised her slender brows as she looked at Linglong Palace Lord with a smile, which didn't look like a smile. Palace Lord, what do you mean? Yiqing Luo, do you treat all of us as fools? The Grand Judicial Officer's face sunk as he shouted furiously. Since you arrived at Linglong Palace yesterday, you've been meeting him privately. Do you really think that we don't know anything? The Grand Judicial Officer pointed at the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace. Following that, he sneered, "This person is not the Overlord. You're planning to do some shady business with this man in Linglong Palace behind the Overlord's back." These words sounded like they were filled with a sense of indignation and indignation. Yiqing Luo guessed that this Grand Judicial Officer might have been hurt in the past. Yiqing Luo glanced sideways at the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace, and then looked at Linglong Palace Lord. The eyes of the Linglong Palace Lord were still fixed on the Palace Lord of the Secluded Darkness Palace. She let out a low chuckle that contained the sweetness and laziness of a young girl. Perhaps you don't know who this person is, but the Palace Master should know who this person is. The topic shifted to the Hall Master. The first judicial judge and the third judicial judge's gaze immediately shifted to the Linglong Palace Master. I didn't expect that the person who had been following Miss Yi would be you. The Linglong Palace Master did not deny it. Her face was cold, but a cold smile appeared on her face. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace obviously did not expect that the people from the Linglong Palace would discover his existence. Coincidentally, he was stopped in his tracks. His face under the black robe was somewhat gloomy. He speedily stood in front of Yiqing Luo, and his tall and slender figure completely hid Yiqing Luo behind him. When he got close to Yiqing Luo, he whispered, "I'm sorry." Then he turned to look at the Linglong Palace's Hall Master and emitted a sinister cold aura. His actions made the Linglong Palace Master laugh. She raised her hand and covered half of her red lips as she laughed softly. "Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace, if I didn't investigate wrongly, you and Miss Yi should have a hostile relationship. Now, putting on a protective stance and standing in front of Miss Yi, don't tell me you've betrayed the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace?" Chapter 41:41. Secluded Palace Lord's body stiffened slightly. It was obvious that the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace knew him and knew his identity, as well as some matters regarding the gloomy palace. But the eyes under the black robe flickered slightly when it met with Linglong Palace Lord's. But he still didn't move away. Like a towering mountain, he blocked Yiqing Luo's way. Secluded Palace Lord? Third Judicial Officer opened his mouth in astonishment as he sized up the man in black robe. In the depths of his eyes, there was a strange glint darting about. Linglong Palace Lord's red lips curled as she said word by word, "On account that you're the Palace Lord of Secluded Palace, if you leave now, I can let you off. But, Miss Yi, you absolutely cannot leave Linglong Palace Lord." Secluded Palace Lord's voice was gloomy and cold as black chi revolved around him. "If we leave, we can only leave together. Ha ha. Palace Lord of Secluded Palace. Have you forgotten that the lady you're protecting behind already has the Overlord? You're risking your life for her. Will she be touched because of this?" Linglong Palace Lord's eyes were slightly cold as his vision slowly shifted onto Yiqing Luo. Secluded Palace Lord's body tensed up as he glanced sideways at the young lady behind him. He stretched out his hand towards her. "I'll bring you away." The hand under the black robe was long and slender with a thick callus on it. When it stretched out towards Yiqing Luo, it was slightly trembling. Yiqing Luo slowly raised her hand. His head immediately lifted up, apparently because Yiqing Luo took the initiative to stretch out her hand. He became excited. If his head wasn't covered by the black robe, she would probably be able to see his pair of glowing eyes. But Yiqing Luo didn't place her hand on his hand, but it moved upwards. She put her hand on his arm. Gently, she pushed it aside. The young lady's lips curled into a faint smile. Her long and narrow eyes were curved as a hint of ridicule was outlined in her eyes. "No need, we can't leave." She laughed lightly, as there wasn't much worry in her tone. The palace master of the Netherworld Palace looked at his hand that was pushed away and stared at it blankly. "As long as you are willing, even if it takes my life, I will send you out safely. You still don't understand?" Yiqing Luo's gaze went past him, meeting Ling Long Palace Lord's gaze. When their eyes met, the energy between the two of them skyrocketed. The girl's red clothes fluttered, and her eyes were full of flirtatious and domineering aura. Even if he was not as old as the Ling Long Palace Lord. In terms of imposing manner, she did not lose out to the Ling Long Palace Master. "What do you mean?" The Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace didn't understand what Yiqing Luo meant. Yiqing Luo lazily raised her lower lip as her expression was extremely sloppy. Her gaze swept over the Ling Long Palace Master and the two judicial officials, and she chuckled. "From the very beginning, the Ling Long Palace Master knew of your existence. If I'm not mistaken, the Palace Master must have mistaken you for Xian from the very beginning." Yiqing Luo's brows rose as she looked at Ling Long Palace Lord in a languid and teasing manner. "Am I right?" Ling Long Palace Lord didn't say a word. Yiqing Luo continued. "Since yesterday, when Wu Fu and Hall Master Wu Yan failed to find trouble and instead suffered a loss, you were already unhappy with me. But because you thought that the person hiding in the dark was the Overlord, so on the surface, you didn't dare to go against me, and even followed my suggestions time and time again, right?" Chapter 41-42. Yesterday, the timing when she sensed the presence of the Ling Long Palace Lord was a little too coincidental. According to the Ling Long Palace Lord's words, she said that she had been there ever since Wu Fu Heir found trouble. Before Wu Fu Heir found trouble, the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace had appeared in her room. So, there was a possibility that the Ling Long Palace Lord knew that there was a second person in her room. So she hid in the dark, wanting to know if the person in the dark was Dmo Xian. But unexpectedly, before the person in the dark appeared. However, when Wu Fu Heir came looking for trouble for no reason, she beat him up and almost lost her life. As the Ling Long Palace Lord, she had no choice but to show herself. After that, she arranged for her to stay in the room next to the judicial courtyard. Wasn't it to confirm who the person hiding in the dark was? So what if you know? The Ling Long Palace Lord didn't refute, but smiled faintly. "Since you've confirmed that the Overlord is not by your side, and everything has been seen through by you, then there's no need to continue this show. Finally going to reveal your true face?" Yiqing Luo wasn't shocked or flustered at all, only smiling at the Ling Long Palace Lord. "Ha! Looks like you already know the reason why I left you in the Ling Long Palace." The Ling Long Palace Lord sneered. Yiqing Luo touched her chin. "I'm very curious. Why me?" "Because your body is just suitable." A trace of madness flashed past the Ling Long Palace Lord's eyes. "As long as you take over this Palace Lord's position, this Palace Lord will be free." When she said the last two words, the Ling Long Palace Lord's face was twisted. That was a kind of craziness that she had been chasing for a long time. Yiqing Luo raised her brows. Body just suitable? It was indeed as what Old Lai and the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace said. The Ling Long Palace Lord's target was a compatible body. The Ling Long Palace Lord's motive was really to make her the next Ling Long Palace Lord. Moreover, it seemed that becoming the Ling Long Palace Lord wasn't as glamorous as it seemed on the surface. Freedom? The Ling Long Palace Lord's freedom was restricted? Yiqing Luo, the surrounding area is filled with our Ling Long Palace Lord's men. As long as the Overlord didn't rush over yesterday, he has no way to enter Ling Long Palace Lord to save you. The smile on the face of the Ling Long Palace Master's face deepened. Her tone was sinister as she said, "Accept reality obediently. If you struggle and get hurt, you'll be the one suffering." The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace sneered. "You can try. You can't touch her at all." The Ling Long Palace Master gave him a stern look and warned, "Remember your status. You and her are on opposing sides. This has nothing to do with you." The Palace Master of Gloomy Palace said coldly, If you want to touch her, ask me first." The palace master of the Linglong Palace did not back down. Her expression became solemn and dignified. She narrowed her eyes and said, "The palace master of the Netherworld Palace has decided to become enemies with the Linglong Palace?" He raised his head up high as his slender figure stood in front of Yi Qing Luo, not moving at all. He used his actions to express his meaning. His expression turned cold as he waved his arm. "Since the palace lord of Ethereal Palace wants to show off in front of the beauty, then this palace lord shall fulfill your hero's wish to save the beauty." Outside the door, 10 over-aggressive female disciples rushed in. Linglong Palace Lord's disciples who were dressed in lotus green robes filled their eyes. Chapter 41-43. Linglong Palace Lord's words had just landed. Those 10 over female disciples' aura exploded. Endless profound steps, like a surging wave, covered the surrounding area of 100 miles. Palace Lord's pupils constricted as he grabbed Yi Qing Luo's wrist and said worriedly, "Be careful," just as he stood in front of Yi Qing Luo and stretched out his hand. The surrounding dark force exploded with a loud bang. The entire house, under the collision of the profound energy, collapsed onto her with a boom. The surrounding green grass and thick trees were all uprooted. In a split second, the earth shook. Everyone was stunned by this extremely destructive scene. Even the person involved. Palace Lord's ears were buzzing as he went into a daze. He stretched out his hand to grab Yi Qing Luo, but grabbed nothing. Boundless profound energy fell straight down from his back. He was wholeheartedly protecting Yi Qing Luo, but strangely grabbed the young lady's hand as his eyes frantically searched for the young lady's figure. He had no time to react to this profound energy. It was at this moment, a burst of valiant and overbearing energy blocked his back. It collided fiercely with that oncoming profound energy. Following that, it was the current situation. Palace Lord of Seclusion Palace suddenly turned his head back. As expected, he saw that fiery figure, under that sky full of profound energy, had an elegant posture, faintly discernible. That slender figure just stood in front of him. He wanted to protect her, but instead made her protect him. Palace Lord of Seclusion Palace rejoiced that he was covered in a layer of black robe, and no one could see his expression under the black robe. A lady like Yi Qing Luo, why would she need his protection? Wasn't this the reason why he liked Yi Qing Luo? The overbearing collision caused everything present to turn into a piece of ruins. Amidst the rising smoke and layers upon layers of ripples from the profound waves, everyone only saw a calm expression, with a hint of laziness in between her brows, quietly standing there. As though earlier, that super strong destructive force wasn't caused by her. Trash! Linglong Palace Lord's expression sunk when he saw this, as his gaze swept towards the 2 judicial officers beside him. The first judicial magistrate and third judicial magistrate looked at each other and leaped towards Yi Qing Luo. The female disciples of the Linglong Palace also followed closely behind and attacked. Yi Qing Luo's gaze didn't change at all as she glanced sideways at the man behind her. "Don't bother about me. If you can leave, then leave first." "How could I leave you behind and go alone?" The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace regained his senses from the earlier shock as he speedily shifted to Yi Qing Luo's side. "I still stand by what I said. If you want to leave, let's leave together. Their target is not you." As Yi Qing Luo was saying that, she flipped her hand to receive the incoming attack. The glower flame fan in her hand opened up as boundless profound energy turned into several wind blades, covering the sky and covering the earth as it surged forward. She continued, "Since the Linglong Palace Lord wants me to inherit the position of the next Palace Lord, he will not really do anything to me. I won't leave." The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace gritted his teeth and spat out. He then charged into the crowd in front of him. The profound light exploded and countless profound energies collided with each other. In the entire space, waves after waves of perilous waves were set off. The moment the first judicial magistrate and third judicial magistrate made their move, their target was Yi Qing Luo. The 2 of them seemed to have moved at the same time, and appeared behind Yiqing Luo. Boundless, profound energy surged in the palms of the two men. Even Yiqing Luo's surrounding aura started to fluctuate. After the two of them exchanged glances, they suddenly struck a palm towards Yiqing Luo. Chapter 41-44. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A deafening explosion sound reverberated through the entire space. In the space, profound waves surged like a monstrous huge wave, wave after wave, crazily attacking. Even the sky had turned into an extremely oppressive deep black. The aura crazily intertwined, swallowing Yiqing Luo entirely. Yiqing Luo. This scene made the palace lord's pupils abruptly widen, as he screamed out Yiqing Luo's name hoarsely. He wanted to dash towards the side where the profound energy was surging, but his path was completely blocked by the Linglong Palace's disciples. "Get lost! Get lost!" The palace lord of the Linglong Palace bellowed furiously. The overbearing energy crazily sent the people who were blocking his way flying, but there were still numerous female disciples who surged forward one after another. Under the black robe, that pair of gloomy and sullen eyes overflowed with large black threads. If he wasn't shrouded in the black robe, then everyone could see. That pair of eyes was like a densely packed spider web with numerous black threads. Those black threads, bit by bit, lingered in his pupils. Endless evil chi overflowed from the palace lord of the Linglong Palace. Pieces after pieces of mist-like evil chi spread out in all directions. Everywhere it went. Those Linglong Palace's female disciples who were flocking towards him all had a huge change in expression. Immediately following that, the expressions on their faces started to turn sinister. One by one, they started to tear each other apart, tangling together. She realized that something was wrong with the evil chi which was spreading out. Linglong Palace Lord's expression changed slightly as she speedily retreated a few steps. She waved her sleeve. A transparent barrier blocked in front of her. It blocked off all the evil energy that was spreading over. But she had avoided the evil chi. But those female disciples who were guarding the surroundings were all affected by the evil chi. Their method of killing each other was extremely vicious. Just a moment later, the entire space was filled with a thick blood stench. Blood also dyed the ground red. This scene made Linglong Palace Lord's expression sunk. She raised her voice and shouted, "Wake up! What do you all look like?" It was so easy for him to be attracted by my mind. However, no one heard her voice. Without these obstacles in the way, he would not be able to stop them. The palace lord of Ethereal Palace immediately rushed towards Yiqing Luo's direction. In the meantime, earlier that wave of boundless energy which had engulfed Yiqing Luo suddenly exploded with an extremely dense and intense aura. Bang! There was a loud noise. A fiery red shadow flashed past in front of his eyes. It was really fiery red. It was like a flame, dazzling and dazzling. That red was blinding for an instant. The surrounding air seemed to become extremely hot as a result. The surging heat and the blazing heat roasted everything around it. The ground was littered with corpses, and the smell of dried meat emanated from them. Many female disciples were affected by the evil Yin energy. Like a wild beast, he opened his mouth and began to tear at his opponent's flesh. It was an extremely bloody and cruel scene. The first judicial judge and the third judicial judge's relaxed faces immediately tensed up. He immediately raised his head and looked in the direction of the fiery red shadow. His entire body instantly froze. That is, it was a giant bird that was entirely red in color. Its phoenix feathers were like flames, overflowing with brilliant colors. Between the spread of its wings, there was an extremely dazzling glow. Vermilion Bird. Chapter 41-45. And what made the first and third judicial system shocked was, on the back of the Vermilion Bird, there was a slender figure. In the raging flames, the light and shadow were floating, and it was very obvious. The red dress was like fire, overflowing with beauty, totally not suppressed by the majesty of the Vermilion Bird, just because it was the same color as the Vermilion Bird. The first and third judicial systems' pupils contracted as they revealed a look of disbelief. The person on the vermilion bird's back. It was Yi Qing Luo. They didn't know much about Yi Qing Luo's investigation. Moreover, those bunch of rich wastrels around Mu Qilan had mentioned it. They only thought that Yi Qing Luo had relied on the Overlord to get her current reputation. Although the great judicial judge had investigated the details of what had happened at the auction, he was not able to do so. The citizens praised Yi Qing Luo so much that she was about to ascend to the heavens. Although she believed the citizens' words that Xiao Yilu wasn't killed by Yi Qing Luo. As for those exaggerated words that Yi Qing Luo alone dealt with most of the elites in the Earth domain, they treated it as everyone's compliments to the Overlord and deliberately spread it out. But they had never heard of it. Yi Qing Luo had subdued an ancient sacred beast as her own battle pet. This was an ancient sacred beast, one of the legendary 4 sacred beasts. It wasn't something that the Overlord could capture personally and give to Yi Qing Luo to form a contract successfully. Under the shocked gazes of the 2 judicial officers, the young lady leaped up, falling from the sky. A sharp gust of wind swept the horrifying, profound energy. Her fingertips moved slightly as the glower flame fan opened up. A bright red glow encircled the glower flame fan. It was like a dazzling, sharp blade, shining with a cold glint. The 2 judicial officers' eyes widened as their bodies instinctively flipped over and swiftly rolled down the ground. Bam! The profound glow fell down. It blasted the ground open. Gravel kept flying. The 2 judges narrowly dodged the fatal blow just now. However, when he rolled on the ground, he was stained with blood and flesh that flew everywhere. When they climbed back up, the 2 of them were in a sorry state. You? How dare you? The senior judicial magistrate didn't expect that his and the 3rd judicial magistrate's sneak attack had failed, and instead, they were teased by Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo smiled as she looked at the both of them. Her brows were filled with ridicule. Great magistrate's words are just too ridiculous. You sneak attacked me, and I haven't even said that you're despicable. You were just scared by my Qi Yin, and you became like this, and you still blame me? Yi Qing Luo. The Grand Inquisitor's eyes darkened. She clenched her fists and glared at him. I don't want to cross swords with you. I was the one who brought you to Ling Long Palace yesterday, and I've spent the most time with you. A cold light flashed across her eyes. I don't want to hurt you. Yi Qing Luo rolled her eyes, and with a flick of her fingertips, the glower flame fan flipped in a few fancy ways in her palm. A coquettish red glow burst forth. Like layers upon layers of ripples, they spread out in all directions. Their speed was extremely slow. The great judicial officer was about to ridicule Yi Qing Luo's action. That surging profound energy was closing in on him. It was just a moment's effort. The profound glow was suddenly like a tide, madly slapping the ground. The sudden majestic force suddenly fell on the abdomen of the Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor only had time to scream. The whole person flew out. Dong! She fell heavily among the corpses. Thick blood stained her nostrils. Chapter 41-46. What a joke. There wasn't the slightest bit of affection. He still dared to play the emotional card in front of her. Just now, the new female disciple was poisoned. The 1st Judicial Division was on her side, preventing the 2nd Judicial Division and the 3rd Judicial Division from interfering. However, this was not because of the Grand Magistrate's good intentions towards her. It was just to compete with the 2nd Judicial Division. And you want to use it as a bargaining chip? Ha, what a joke. The Grand Judge opened his mouth, wanting to refute. However, large mouthfuls of blood gushed out from his mouth. The Grand Judge clutched his chest in pain, his entire body trembling and curling up. Yi Qing Luo. The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace looked at the vermilion bird in the sky and took a look at Yi Qing Luo. It was until the flames around Yi Qing Luo had subsided before he hurried over to her. He had also retracted the sinister aura emanating from his body. However, the surrounding female disciples didn't stop killing each other with ferocious expressions. Yiqing Luo kept her glower flame fan as she raised her eyes towards the palace lord of secluded Darkness Palace and was just about to open her mouth. However, his eyes suddenly widened. She quickly reached out and grabbed the palace master of secluded Darkness Palace. With a jerk of her elbow, Lin Mingya swiftly pulled Lin Mingya behind him. Then, her other hand formed a palm chi and slapped towards the back of the palace master of Gloomy Palace. Like a tidal wave, the profound light surged out with great momentum. Bang, 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 bang. A few profound waves collided, and the sound of explosions was deafening. The entire space seemed to be distorted. The profound waves were filled with layers and layers of ripples that couldn't be smoothed out. This palm had indeed blocked a large amount of dark force in front of him. But, ugh, surging profound energy, the remnant might vibrated as a strong tail wind slapped onto Yiqing Luo's chest. She felt a fishy taste in her throat and took a few steps back. Behind him was the palace master of the Netherworld Palace. If she retreated like that, she would definitely fall into the arms of the palace master of the Netherworld Palace. Yiqing Luo's eyes flashed slightly, and with a turn of her feet, she changed her direction. He was already under pressure from the aftershock. His body moved so much. His legs went soft, and he fell to the ground. A few streaks of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. The arms of the Palace of Darkness, Lord Zhang froze in midair. The eyes under the black robe gazed deeply at Yiqing Luo. Obviously, Yiqing Luo could totally retreat into his arms. Why did he have to forcefully change his direction? Aggravate my internal injuries? It was just a simple touch. She couldn't even stand it. He looked at the pale-faced girl who was half collapsed on the ground. Little by little, he retracted his arms that were suspended in midair. As for the palace master of the Netherworld Palace's changes in expression and actions, the palace master of the secluded Darkness Palace was stunned. Yiqing Luo didn't have the time to bother about it, nor did she have the time to care about it. After she steadied herself, she immediately raised her eyes and looked in the direction of the powerful attack. Linglong Palace Lord's expression was icy cold as a pair of gloomy, beautiful eyes, like a poisonous snake, wrapped around Yiqing Luo's body. The person who attacked just now was the palace master of Linglong Palace. Seeing that the first and second judicial judges couldn't do anything to her, was he going to take action personally? Yiqing Luo's eyes narrowed as her lips curled into a bloodthirsty arc. Before he could speak, suddenly she heard a sharp voice coming from afar. Yiqing Luo, you didn't expect this, right? You slut, still being complacent. Did you really think that our palace master would take action against me? Following that voice, she saw 4 female disciples carrying a carriage nearing quickly. Chapter 41-47. The entire Linglong Palace Hall was in such a huge commotion. The second judicator naturally felt it. In addition, the maidservant sent by the 3 judicial authorities came to her and told her some simple things in a concise and comprehensive manner. For example, the reason why Linglong Palace Lord gave in to Yiqing Luo was because he suspected that the Overlord was hiding something. For example, Linglong Palace Lord's concession towards Yiqing Luo was because Linglong Palace Lord wanted Yiqing Luo to become the next Palace Lord. For example, everything that the Linglong Palace Lord had done and said earlier was actually not counted. It was merely a show that was put up in front of Yiqing Luo. Hearing this news, the second preceptor's indignant heart finally calmed down. She was also the second in command of the Linglong Palace. Furthermore, it was the high and mighty second judge. However, the second judicial officer couldn't understand. In this Linglong Hall, there were plenty of people who were much more outstanding than Yiqing Luo. Why did they let Yiqing Lu be the next Linglong Palace Lord? Obviously, she was more suitable for the position of Linglong Palace Lord, wasn't she? At this time, the surging dark force aura from the battle outside became even more intense. Once again, he heard those female disciples, who were constantly rushing towards the direction where the profound energy was surging, talking as they ran. The second judicial judge roughly understood. The person hiding behind the scenes was not the Overlord, but but the gigolo that Yi Qing Luo had secretly raised. After knowing that it wasn't Dizun, Linglong Palace Lord had made a move on Yi Qing Luo. It was a mighty group of people. The dark force soared to the sky and shook the entire Linglong Palace. The second judicial judge was excited. She didn't feel that a young lady like Yi Qing Luo, along with a gigolo, would be able to deal with so many people from Linglong Palace. Furthermore, the temple master was also present. What kind of waves could a little girl stir up? The second preceptor immediately called the maidservant beside her and carried her to the direction of the battle. As soon as he arrived, from afar, they saw Yi Qing Luo being thrown onto the ground by the hallmaster. Yi Qing Luo was in a sorry state as she vomited blood. Not long ago, the humiliation he had suffered from Yi Qing Luo at this moment had obtained a carefree release. Second, the sudden appearance of justice. Everyone's gaze shifted to the second judicial judge. The Linglong Palace Lord also frowned slightly. Looking at the second preceptor's ferocious and proud smile, he didn't say anything in the end to stop him. Second judicial officer stared at Yi Qing Luo venomously as he laughed complacently. Aren't you very arrogant? Continue to stand up and be arrogant? Why are you lying on the ground? She spat fiercely and sneered. You're just a vixen who uses your status as the Overlord to show off. Do you really think you're someone important? If not for Yi Qing Luo, she would not lose face in front of the disciples of the Linglong Palace. If not for Yi Qing Luo, how could the Linglong Palace Lord be so ruthless towards her? Yi Qing Luo, the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace, slowly walked to Yi Qing Luo's side as he half squatted down, trying to support her. But it was avoided by Yi Qing Luo. She raised her hand and blocked the hand of the Palace Master of Gloomy Palace. She shook her head at him. I'm fine. I've been rejected again. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace sneered in a low voice. We are just ordinary friends helping each other. Are you going to reject me? I'm really fine. Yi Qing Luo took a deep breath and lifted her slender fingers to wipe the blood off the corners of her lips as she tried to stand up. But this movement, her chest, which was injured earlier, started to emit an oppressive pain. Her legs turned soft as she staggered and fell onto the ground. Chapter 41-48. Yi Qing Luo pursed her pale lips and was about to reply. Second elder saw Yi Qing Luo's weak side and laughed heartily. Yi Qing Luo, this elder advises you to be obedient. It's your fortune that the Hall Master has taken a liking to you. Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. The third judicial judge looked at the expression of the Linglong Palace Lord. Seeing her cold expression, he did not stop the second judicial judge for showing off here. He already had a plan in his mind. It looked like Linglong Palace Lord really wanted Yi Qing Chung to be the next successor to the Palace Lord. It wasn't just the second judicial officer who couldn't understand. Even she really couldn't understand why they had chosen Yi Qing Luo. If the Linglong Palace was handed over to Yi Qing Luo, can this Linglong Palace Hall really survive? However, no matter how many questions he had in his heart, she couldn't bring herself to ask the Hall Master either. No matter what the reason behind it was impossible. As long as this was the Linglong Palace Master's goal. That was the goal of all of them, at least for now. He still had to obey the Palace Lord of Linglong Palace. In just a short moment, the tripartite judicator's thoughts had already turned 1,000 times. His eyes moved slightly. She smiled and put on an expression of a peacemaker. Misty, although the second judicial judge's words are not pleasant to hear, she is not wrong. The Hall Master has taken a liking to you and wants to groom you to be the next Hall Master. This means that he appreciates your abilities and you as a person. If you become the next Palace Master, the entire Linglong Palace will be yours. I'm sure you're aware of the Linglong Palace's position in Jianghu. If you become the Linglong Palace Lord, it will absolutely be 100 benefits and no harm to you. The third judicial judge's words invisibly stirred up the second judicial judge's nerves. Originally towards the fact that Linglong Palace Lord had taken a liking to Yi Qing Luo to become the next Palace Lord, he was already filled with puzzlement and displeasure. Now, He was stimulated by the words, "The entire Linglong Hall is yours." Although the second preceptor was a little angry, but he was not a fool either. She targeted Yi Qing Luo in such a manner. If Yi Qing Luo really became the Linglong Palace Lord, she was definitely the first one to be punished as a warning to others. Second judicial officer's eyes flashed past a vicious glint as he looked at Yi Qing Luo with jealousy and hatred. She clenched her fists tightly and cupped her hands towards the Linglong Palace Master. "Lord Palace Master, this subordinate feels that she does not have the qualifications to become the Linglong Palace Master." Not waiting for Linglong Palace Lord to reply, she continued, "The reason why Yi Qing Luo came to Linglong Palace is because she killed Shadowless City's mysterious maiden Mu Qiulan. On top of that, without embroiling city's goddess, Xiao Yulu had died at the hands of the Palace of Gloomy Darkness because of her. Now, in less than a day since she arrived at the Linglong Palace, she has already torn the Linglong Palace apart. He provoked enemies everywhere and indirectly caused the death of our new female disciple who just entered the Linglong Palace." At this point, the tone of the second judicial officer became obviously indignant. "Lord Palace Master, she carries the blood feud of too many Linglong Palace disciples." The Palace Lord of Linglong Palace slowly shifted her cold and gloomy gaze onto her because of the second Lord's words. The coldness that shot out from his eyes, it was like frost, causing one to tremble with fear. The second preceptor felt a chill down his spine when he saw that gaze and shivered.